Chapter 373. Bang! Although Dongfang Ziyun's cultivation hadn't reached the life and death chamber, she had poured all of her true qi into this attack. She was caught off guard and hit Dongfang Hong's chest. Dongfang Hong, who was at the life and death chamber, spat out a mouthful of blood and flew backwards. Dongfang Ziyun took the opportunity to break free from Dongfang Hong's embrace and dashed forward. Ziyun, you. Dongfang Hong's eyes were filled with shock, disbelief, confusion, anger, and many other emotions. I learned all of this from you, big brother. Dongfang Ziyun glanced at Dongfang Hong one last time, then took out a talisman paper from her origin ring and stuck it on her body. In the next moment, the talisman paper shone brightly, and Dongfang Ziyun's speed increased tenfold. You actually have another wind walk talisman. Dongfang Hong laughed bitterly, his eyes full of regret. Just now, the thought of sacrificing Dongfang Ziyun flashed across his mind. However, he hesitated and couldn't do it. In his eyes, he thought Dongfang Ziyun was sincere towards him. In the next moment, he was sacrificed by Dongfang Ziyun. Not only that, Dongfang Ziyun had secretly left a wind walk talisman behind. She didn't use it to escape, as she was afraid that Dongfang Hong would take it away. She wanted to use it at a critical moment. As for the so-called sibling relationship, it was fake. They weren't blood-related siblings, but only cousins. In a few breaths' time, the demonic corpse puppets had caught up and punched at him. Dongfang Hong couldn't resist at all. He screamed as his body was penetrated by the demonic corpse puppets' fists, creating dozens of bloody holes. His entire body was like a sieve, bleeding non-stop. Damn it, I'm the pride of the Dongfang family. To think that I'll die here. Dongfang Hong's mouth kept bleeding, his eyes full of regret. Unfortunately, it was too late to mend the pen after the sheep was lost. Ye Guqin didn't show any mercy when he saw this. He directly charged at Dongfang Hong with the blood hell sword in hand. Dongfang Hong saw this and roared, "Sinister Baiming family, if you kill me, the Dongfang family will hunt you down to the ends of the earth." Ye Guqin was unperturbed. He was least afraid of threats. The sharp blood-red sword qi tore Dongfang Hong's body apart. The blood mist was absorbed by the blood hell sword and the heavenly demon general armor, and the blood-red light on the surface became even thicker. The blood spirit spell formation was immediately activated and began to absorb the blood qi to slowly repair the two divine weapons. An expert of the minor Xian gate would have an incomparably dense life force, which would be of great help to the repair of the two divine weapons. Dongfang Ziyun escaped. Ye Guqin frowned slightly. His soul could reach a range of 600 meters, but he was unable to sense Dongfang Ziyun's presence within that range. It was clear that Dongfang Ziyun had already fled far away. With her windwalk talisman, she was most likely heading for the exit of the bottomless devil abyss. Ye Guqin's eyes flashed. He didn't choose to chase after Dongfang Ziyun. Instead, he went to find the crystal cloud barrier. After Dongfang Hong's death, the crystal cloud cover became an ownerless item. Ye Guqin had used his blood essence to refine the crystal cloud cover into his own treasure. Although the crystal cloud cover didn't have any offensive capabilities, it could be used to restrain enemies or protect oneself. Even ordinary life and death chamber experts might not be able to shatter the crystal cloud cover in a short period of time. Ye Guqin was confident that he could shatter it because he had mastered the 10,000 God Tribulation and Heaven Annihilation. After putting away the crystal cloud cover, Ye Guqin glanced at the Eternal Devil City. He didn't hesitate and directly left. The current him didn't have the ability to explore the secrets of this place. Moreover, Ye Guqin couldn't guarantee that the immemorial sword token would be able to protect him forever. Moreover, Ye Guqin guessed that if he wanted to know the secrets of this place, the most basic requirement was to collect all the immemorial sword tokens. After thinking for a while, Ye Guqin directly left the bottomless devil abyss. He would come back to explore the secrets of this place when he had the ability in the future. Not long after, Ye Guqin walked out of the bottomless devil abyss. Seeing the light of day again, Ye Guqin let out a sigh of relief. The episode this time could be said to be a little thrilling. If you didn't have the immemorial sword token, Yiguchin shook his head slightly and stopped thinking about it. However, what made him frown was that there was no trace of Dongfang Ziyun leaving. Yiguchin couldn't even determine which direction Dongfang Ziyun had fled in. Clearly, Dongfang Ziyun was very careful and didn't leave any trace behind. Yiguchin's eyes were deep. It seemed that even he had misjudged her. That seemingly arrogant girl was actually ruthless and scheming, far surpassing Dongfang Hong. Dongfang Ziyun's escape is a hidden danger. Fortunately, she mistakenly thought that I was from the Baiming family, so she shouldn't target the Saint Origin dynasty for now. Moreover, she doesn't know my name. Yiguchin thought. Although Dongfang Ziyun had escaped with her life, Yiguchin didn't have to worry too much about the Dongfang family's revenge in the short term. If it was delayed, Yiguchin might not even be in the Saint Origin dynasty. Therefore, Yiguchin didn't worry too much. He directly left the bottomless devil abyss, found the azure sky eagle waiting outside, and set off for the great desolate mansion. At the same time, hundreds of miles away from the bottomless devil abyss, Dongfang Ziyun, who was wearing a purple gold robe, stopped and panted. The wind walk talisman on her body had also turned to dust. It was obviously a one-time use treasure. Damn it. It wasn't easy to find Dongfang Hong and follow him to search for treasures. Compared to the Side family, my progress was much faster. But now, it's all ruined by that stinking brat. Dongfang Ziyun's eyes were cold. Her respect and admiration for Dongfang Hong was just an act. With her status, she had to rely on someone with a higher cultivation base and status. As one of the top 3 prodigies in the Dongfang family's Side family, Dongfang Hong naturally had the right to rely on Dongfang Ziyun. Dongfang Ziyun had already known that Dongfang Hong intended to sacrifice her, but she was hesitant. Dongfang Ziyun decided to make the first move to gain a chance of survival for herself. Big brother, don't blame me. I've learned a lot from you. But don't worry, I won't let that stinking brat go. Dongfang Ziyun's beautiful eyes flashed with a sinister light. She decided to spread the news to the Dongfang family's main branch. Although she had indirectly killed Dongfang Hong, she could push the blame to the Baiming family. At the same time, Dongfang Ziyun planned to contact the strongest prodigy in the Side family, Dongfang Shuri. No matter what, Dongfang Hong was still one of the top 3 prodigies in the Side family. As the top prodigy, Dongfang Shuri definitely wouldn't just stand by and watch. If I spread the news to the main branch, I'll be rewarded. Then, I'll tell Dongfang Shuri that I can build a relationship with him. His talent and resources are much better than Dongfang Hong's. Dongfang Ziyun smiled faintly. Although she had suffered a setback this time, it was a blessing in disguise. With Dongfang Shuri's temper, he'll definitely come to the Saint Origin dynasty. His talent and strength aren't any weaker than those prodigies in the main branch. I've already memorized the appearance of that Baiming family member. As long as I search carefully, he won't be able to escape. At that time, I'll be able to get a share of the credit and rise to the top. When Dongfang Shuri comes, that Baiming family member will definitely die. Then, even if Dongfang Shuri can't deal with him, he'll die in that person's hands, which will naturally anger the main branch. At that time, I'll be able to use this opportunity to build a relationship with the main branch. In the end, I'll still be the one who benefits. Dongfang Ziyun's thoughts were meticulous. With a deep smile on her face, she had thought of many follow-up plans. She came from a humble background, and was considered to be at the bottom of the Dongfang family's Side family. She had always relied on disguises and schemes to reach her current position. Naturally, she wouldn't miss the opportunity in front of her. In her eyes, Yiguchin was just a person who was going to die for her plan to rise to the top. Chapter 374. Yiguchin, who had left the Tianhuang Plains on the Green Sky Eagle, naturally did not know about Dongfang Ziyun's plan. However, Dongfang Ziyun didn't know about his talent and strength. What Dongfang Ziyun did not know was that the enemy he was facing was not an ordinary youth, but a peerless sword cultivator who possessed monstrous cultivation talent and an indifferent and cold temperament. Thus, the person she should be wary of wasn't Yi Guqin. It was Dongfang Ziyun. Unfortunately, Dongfang Ziyun didn't know how terrifying Yi Guqin was. That was why she was so confident that she could use Yi Guqin as a pawn in her plan. Yi Guqin didn't worry about the Dongfang family's threat, but he didn't worry too much. Because there were more important things to do right now. Northern Liang City. Sitting cross-legged on the back of the blue sky eagle, Yi Guqin gazed into the distance. While Yi Guqin was rushing to the Great Desolation Mansion. Outside the Saint Origin Dynasty, in the middle of a barren mountain range. Lotus Village, Sword Heart Spring. This place was filled with sword-type Taoist rhymes all year round. In the clear spring waterfall, a young girl in a green dress was immersed in the spring water. She was like a lotus flower emerging from clear water. Even though she was in a deep coma, she was still like a beautiful painting under the contrast of the surrounding natural scenery, making people linger. The girl in the azure dress was the unconscious Su Jianshi. Two girls stood next to Su Jianshi, one on the left and one on the right. They were holding Su Jianshi's cold hands. One of the girls wore a simple cloth dress. It was Su Qiqiao. The other girl wore a light gauze dress. She had silver hair and watery eyes. It was Shui. However, at this moment, there was a trace of worry on the faces of the two girls. Big sister Su's aura is weaker than before. Shui's eyes were covered with a layer of mist. She pouted as if she was about to cry. Don't cry. Didn't you say to trust your big brother? He'll definitely get the Saint Herb and save big sister Su Jianshi, Su Qiqiao comforted. Not far from them was a black-clothed young man with deep facial features. He stood there silently and stared at Su Jianshi, who was immersed in the spring water. His brows were tightly knitted like an iron lock. The black-clothed youth was Su Jianshi's older brother, Su Moyan. Two figures had appeared outside the Sword Heart Spring. One wore a hemp robe and had a beard. The other had a muscular body and carried a large hammer on his back. They were the two divine palace experts of Lotus Village, village chief Long Yuan and Gui Fu. Moyan, you. Long Yuan wanted to say something. Sister's situation is getting worse. I knew that Yi Guqin. He died in the Void Sword Realm, Su's voices. Long Yuan's and Fu's, and Fu's smiled. Although the village was secluded, S's was T's, voice Ts and S. Ts they didn't tell Shui and Su Qiqiao about Yi Guqin's death because they were concerned about their children's feelings. But Su Moyan couldn't accept the news. His heart was cold. Back then, he even swore that he would find the sacred medicine for my little sister. In the end, he even lost his own life. I really don't know how my little sister fell in love with this kind of person. If it was in the past, this kind of person wouldn't even be able to enter the doors of my Su family. The Su family. As Su Moyan spoke, his tones suddenly paused, as if he had touched upon some bad memory, causing his face to darken. Dragon Abyss Village Chief and Ghost Hatchet looked at each other in silence. Su Moyan took a deep breath and said firmly, "Please allow me to leave the village." "What if I don't agree?" Long Yuan said helplessly. "I still have to go," said Su Moyan. He could sense that Su Jianshi's aura was getting weaker and weaker. Even Long Yuan was a little worried. He felt that he was being too optimistic when he said that she could hold on for a year. Now, it seemed that Su Jianshi could hold on for a few more months. "Moyan, you have to be careful." Long Yuan finally sighed. "Village Chief, Uncle Fu Gui, farewell." Su Moyan cupped his hands and left the Sword Heart Spring. His aura suddenly erupted. He was at the peak of the Divine Soul 9 transformations. His cultivation wasn't any weaker than Xian Hao and the other top prodigies of the 7 major factions. Boom! A rumble spread out. A pair of pitch-black eagle wings appeared behind Su Moyan's back. These weren't true chi wings formed by the life and death threshold. They were manifested through a secret technique. Su Moyan flapped his eagle wings and flew out of Lotus Village like a black arrow. Long Yuan and Fu Gui sighed inwardly as they watched Su Moyan's departing figure. If that incident hadn't happened to the Su family, perhaps the young master's strength would be enough to compete with those prodigies of the South Horizon region. Long Yuan sighed. That's fate. Fu Gui also shook his head. Then, his eyes flashed and he suddenly asked, Long Yuan, do you think Yiguchen is really dead? Although I don't want to believe it, the news shouldn't be wrong. However, he is someone recognized by the Divine Condor, and the Divine Condor is that person's pet. Long Yuan's gaze suddenly turned to another place. It was the back mountain of the village. It was the cliff with the cave that the Divine Condor had once guarded. Even with Long Yuan and Fu Gui's divine dwelling strength, when they looked at the cliff cave, their eyes were filled with boundless reverence and respect. It was as if the existence in the cave was the entire Lotus Village's faith and pillar. Putting aside Su Moyan, who had left Lotus Village for the Great Desolate Mansion's 5 elemental land in search of sacred herbs. After several days of flying, Yiguchen finally arrived at the boundary of the Great Desolate Mansion. The Great Desolate Mansion was one of the 10 great mansions of the Saint Origin Empire. Because it was close to the 5 elemental land, and because it was constantly at war with the barbarian race, its population was far less than the other mansions. However, its per capita combat strength and valiance were higher than the other mansions. This was also the reason why the prodigies of the other mansions were very afraid of the prodigies of the Great Desolate Mansion in the past. This was because most of the prodigies of the Great Desolate Mansion had fought with the barbarian race before. They had rich combat experience and were shrewd and ruthless. They were far from the flowers of the other mansions. Not long after entering the Great Desolate Mansion, Yiguchen chose to settle down and sent the Green Sky Eagle back. This was because 1/3 of the hundreds of cities in the Great Desolate Mansion had already fallen into the hands of the barbarian race. The barbarian race was running rampant everywhere. Flying in the sky on the Green Sky Eagle was too conspicuous. It would be troublesome if he was discovered by the barbarian race. Therefore, Yiguchen chose to travel on foot. On one hand, it was safe and concealed. On the other hand, it was also a preliminary investigation of the barbarian race. However, after a day, Yiguchen suddenly discovered an awkward situation. He was lost. Yiguchen looked around. Most of the terrain of the Great Desolate Mansion was desolate desert or crimson sand plains. It was very difficult to determine the direction. I can't find anyone else for the time being. There's no way to find out the direction of northern Liang City. Yiguchen was dressed in a black robe and wore a bamboo hat on his head. A pitch-black veil hung down and covered half of his handsome face. Yiguchen knew that he was now a dead man. Since the sword sect Talon wanted to make him a secret trump card, Yiguchen would naturally not leak the news that he was still alive in advance. Moreover, it was possible that some of the enemies of the 7 great forces would know in advance, and it would be disadvantageous to him. Just as Yiguchen was thinking about how to get to northern Liang City, his footsteps suddenly came to a halt. His sharp spirit sensed that the ground was shaking slightly. Yiguchen looked around and saw that not far away, there was a group of people rushing over. There were a few figures riding Fergana horses and protecting a carriage in the middle. At the same time, Yiguchen's sharp senses picked up a faint smell of blood. His eyes narrowed slightly. This group of people was obviously not simply rushing over. Chapter 375. Yiguchen did not like trouble. However, Yiguchen could not tell the direction and the group of carriages seemed to know the way. Therefore, Yiguchen could only go forward and ask, "Who's there?" Just as Yiguchen walked forward, the carriage that had already rushed over suddenly stopped. The middle-aged man riding on the back of the Fergana horse in the lead looked at Yiguchen with a face full of vigilance. The middle-aged man's face was pale and his aura was weak. It was obvious that he had suffered serious injuries. This is my first time in the great desolate mansion and I lost my way. Can you tell me where northern Liang City is? Yi Guqin cupped his fists and asked. You're going to northern Liang City too? Seeing that Yi Guqin did not seem to be from the barbarian tribe, the middle-aged man's tone softened. Oh, could it be that you're going to northern Liang City too? Yi Guqin raised his eyebrows slightly. Yes, but it's not convenient for us now. The middle-aged man forced a smile. Are you being hunted down? Yi Guqin didn't beat around the bush. He spoke bluntly. The middle-aged man and the guards around him were slightly surprised. They did not expect the young man wearing a bamboo hat and black veil in front of them to be able to see through their current situation. You're seriously injured and there's a smell of blood on you. It's not hard to guess, Yi Guqin said indifferently. Little brother, since you know, I won't hide it from you. You can follow us, but if there's any danger, we can't guarantee your safety, the middle-aged man said with a wry smile. Understood, Yi Guqin nodded slightly. The reason why he was not afraid of such danger and trouble was because he could sense the middle-aged man's cultivation base. 9 changes of soul. Based on this, he could infer that the person who was chasing them should not be above the life and death threshold. Otherwise, this man would not be just seriously injured. As long as it was not a life and death threshold, Yi Guqin was not afraid. But at this moment, the curtain of the carriage was suddenly lifted, and a sharp, ear-piercing voice rang out, "Husband, what are you doing? Hurry up and leave." Yi Guqin glanced around and saw 2 figures sitting inside the carriage. One was a middle-aged woman, and the other was a pretty young girl. The middle-aged woman had a curvaceous figure and a charming face. However, the thick layer of makeup on her face made her look like a brothel keeper. As for the young girl, she seemed to be on the other end of the spectrum. She wore a long skirt with tassels, and her beautiful face was without any makeup. Her skin was white and beautiful, and she had a youthful appearance. She gave off a gentle and delicate feeling, as if she was a daughter of a noble family. "Madam, this little brother is lost. It just so happens that he's also heading to northern Liang City. Let's bring him along," said the middle-aged man. What? The situation is already like this, and you're still being kind? What's the use of bringing a burden along? The middle-aged woman said sarcastically again. She seemed to think that bringing Yi Guqin along would slow them down. "Madam, if we leave him here, won't we be sending the barbarian tribe to their deaths?" The middle-aged man had an upright character. He seemed to be unwilling to see Yi Guqin die here. "You can rest assured. I have some ability to protect myself," Yi Guqin said. He did not mind the middle-aged woman's harshness. After all, they had no obligation to bring Yi Guqin along. "I'm sorry, little brother. Come with us. You'll drive the carriage in front. However, if you encounter any danger, there's nothing we can do," the middle-aged man said apologetically. "Thank you. If there's a need, I'll definitely help," Yi Guqin said. He had a good impression of this straightforward middle-aged man. Oh, a young man's tone is not small. It's good that he won't be a burden. Seeing that the middle-aged man insisted on bringing Yi Guqin along, the middle-aged woman curled her lips in disdain. Although Yi Guqin was wearing a bamboo hat and a black veil covering his face, his voice was that of a young man's. Therefore, the woman did not think that a young man's cultivation could be strong. However, the delicate girl in the carriage looked curiously at Yi Guqin. Then, Yi Guqin drove the carriage. The middle-aged man and several guards surrounded the carriage and moved forward. About half an hour after they left, a group of figures riding black wildebeests arrived. There were about a dozen people in this group. Each of them was tall and strong. Their bodies were as strong as bulls. The leather armor they wore could not hide their strong muscles. They were a group of barbarian tribe people. The few people in the lead were 7 feet tall. Their bodies were branded with blood-red totems. Although the pictures of the totems were different, the scarlet color caused one's heart to tremble with fear at a glance. Some of the barbarian tribe people in the rear looked at the people in the lead with reverence in their eyes. They were just ordinary barbarian tribe soldiers. However, the people in the lead were totem warriors of higher status. Lord Wu sang, "The remaining members of the Shao family should have just left," a barbarian tribe soldier said respectfully after checking the ruts on the ground. "Well, there's no time to lose. Let's hurry up and catch up with them. The girl from the Shao family is the person that Holy Sun Xueling wants. If we can't get her back, you will all be thrown into the blood-dissolving demon pool," the totem warrior named Wu Sang said coldly. Hearing about the blood-dissolving demon pool, many of the barbarian tribe soldiers around trembled. Even the barbarian tribe people who were not afraid of death would be terrified of watching their own bodies melt. After that, the barbarian tribe cavalry, led by Wu Sang and other totem warriors, chased after Ye Guqin and the people of the Shao family. On the other side, Ye Guqin was driving the carriage. He had also learned some basic information from the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was called Shao Lai. He was the master of the Shao family in Wuyan City. The Shao family was not a super family. It was just an ordinary small family. There was no heaven and earth spirit bridge expert. The person with the highest cultivation in the Shao family was only Shao Lai, the master of the 9 changes of divine soul. 7 days ago, the entire Wuyan city was attacked by the blood barbarian tribe. Shao Lai took his wife, Madame Shao, daughter Shao Wanru, and a group of elders and guards out of Wuyan city. They wanted to escape to northern Liang city. However, who knew that there was a holy sun among the blood barbarian tribe who participated in the attack? The holy sun accidentally saw Shao Wanru and wanted to capture her alive. Shao Lai would not let his daughter fall into the hands of the blood barbarian tribe. After that, he fought with the holy sun. The holy sun of the barbarian tribe was at least at the 8 changes of divine soul. Coupled with the strange totem power and various barbarian methods, Shao Lai was not a match for him. He was even seriously injured. However, Shao Lai and the group of elders and guards managed to carve out a bloody path for themselves. However, the elders were all sacrificed. Only Shao Lai and a few remaining guards were left. They fled with Madame Shao and Shao Wanru. "I have some healing elixirs. Brother Shao, take them." After understanding the situation, Ye Guqin directly handed a jade bottle to Shao Lai. "Thank you, little brother." Shao Lai took it casually. He did not care much at first. However, when he opened the bottle, he was shocked by the thick pill fragrance. "This is a supreme grade elixir." Shao Lai was stunned. He thought that Ye Guqin was just a lone cultivator and the elixirs he gave should be ordinary healing elixirs. He did not expect them to be supreme grade elixirs. This level of medicinal pill was not something that anyone could casually take out. Even his Shao family only had a few elixirs. They were treated like treasures and would not use them unless they really needed them. However, this young man in front of him casually took out a bottle and looked like he did not care much about it. Shao Lai looked at Ye Guqin again and finally understood that this young man with a bamboo hat covering his face was not a simple character. Shao Lai took the elixir and distributed it to the injured guards. "Oh right, brother Shao, why are you going to northern Liang city?" Ye Guqin asked. In order to get rid of the blood barbarian tribe's pursuit, they did not have to go to northern Liang city. In fact, there were cities closer to northern Liang city. Firstly, northern Liang city is about to hold an exchange meeting between the 7 major forces. That should be the safest place in the entire Great Desolate Mansion. Secondly, northern Liang city is where the Shinto family is based. My daughter, Shao Wanru, is the fiancée of the Shinto family's prodigy, Shinto Miao. Shao Lai said with a hint of pride in his tone. Shinto Miao's fiancée? Ye Guqin's eyes revealed a strange look. Chapter 376. The Shinto family was a super family in the Great Desolate Mansion. They had a heaven and earth spirit bridge expert and were very famous. Logically speaking, they should not have any connection with a small family like the Xiao family. However, when Xiao Lai was young, he had unintentionally saved a severely injured warrior. That warrior happened to be an important figure in the Shintu family, Shintu Miao's father. Later on, out of gratitude, Shintu Miao's father promised that if Xiao Lai had a son, he would become sworn brothers with Shintu Miao. If he had a daughter, they would become husband and wife. It was also because of this that Xiao Wanru became Shintu Miao's fiancé. Now that Black Salt City had been breached and the Xiao family was being pursued by the blood barbarian tribe's holy son, Xiao Lai, who had nowhere else to go, could only bring Xiao Wanru to the Shintu family in northern Liang City. Ye Guqin did not have a deep impression of Shintu Miao, nor did he have a good impression of him. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, Xia Yubing had joined forces with Shintu Miao to hunt him down. Shintu Miao had also attacked him in the Void Sword Realm. However, Ye Guqin did not care about Shintu Miao now. He and Shintu Miao were no longer on the same level. Hence, when Ye Guqin knew that the girl in the carriage, Xiao Wanru, was Shintu Miao's fiancé, he did not have any reaction. He would not implicate his fiancé for Shintu Miao. After all, Ye Guqin would part ways with them when they reached northern Liang City. Inside the carriage, Xiao Wanru's face had a tinge of melancholy. She probed, "Mother, Wanru does not want to marry Shintu Miao." "Silly girl, what nonsense are you talking about? The Shintu family is a super family in the Great Desolate Mansion. That Shintu Miao is even more talented. He even entered a top force like the Sealed Blade Royal Palace. You have to know that the 7 major forces are existences that we can only look up to," Madame Xiao said with a yearning look. Just the Shintu family was enough to make Madame Xiao kneel, not to mention the 7 major forces. "But Wanru does not like Shintu Miao," Xiao Wanru said with grievance. Xiao Wanru had seen Shintu Miao before. He was tall and strong, and his body was covered in red demonic patterns. He was no different from a barbarian. Moreover, she knew Shintu Miao's character. He called himself Mad Blade and was arrogant and conceited. Xiao Wanru really did not like people like him. "Girl, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You like sword cultivators like Ye Guqin from the sword sect, but firstly, that Ye Guqin is already dead. Secondly, even if he's not dead, with our status and identity, can we form a connection with such geniuses?" Even a snobbish person like Madame Xiao would exclaim in admiration when she mentioned Ye Guqin. In her eyes, Ye Guqin's status was naturally higher than Shintu Miao's, but it was a pity that he was already dead. When Xiao Wanru heard this, her beautiful eyes were filled with disappointment. "So don't even think about Ye Guqin. Just follow young Master Shintu with peace of mind. This is such a good opportunity, and it's your father's good fortune to have saved old Master Shintu. If you dare to go back on your word, I won't let you off," Madame Xiao said with conviction. In her eyes, it was glorious to be the wife of a great family's young master. However, Xiao Wanru was not only unhappy, but also wanted to go back on her word. Wasn't this a public slap to the Shintu family's face? Therefore, Madame Xiao would definitely not allow Xiao Wanru to go back on her word. "Mother, you only know how to please the Shintu family. Don't you care about my happiness?" Xiao Wanru's eyes were watery as she spoke with grievance. She was a young girl in her prime. Which young girl would not yearn for love? In Xiao Wanru's heart, Ye Guqin had long been the standard for her other half. Feelings are nurtured. With status and identity, there will naturally be happiness. "Don't worry, I'm thinking for you. Don't make things difficult for father and mother, okay?" Madame Xiao spoke with emotion and reason, leaving Xiao Wanru speechless. Although her face was full of bitterness, she still nodded with grievance. "That's right. Don't worry, young Master Shintu will not treat us unfairly," Madame Xiao said with a smile. Outside the carriage. Although Ye Guqin had no intention of eavesdropping on their conversation, Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru's voices were not soft. Therefore, even if Ye Guqin did not want to listen, he still heard them. He did not expect that a young girl he had never met would have a trace of longing for him. However, Yi Guqin was not a sentimental person. He would not help Xiao Wanru go back on her word just because of her longing for him. This was someone else's family matter. Yi Guqin would not meddle in other people's business. Therefore, Yi Guqin only pretended not to hear and drove the carriage with peace of mind. About 2 hours later, Yi Guqin's eyes suddenly became sharp as he sat in the carriage. "Big brother Xiao, you have to be careful," Yi Guqin suddenly said. "Little brother, what do you mean?" Xiao Lai did not understand. Yi Guqin frowned slightly. Although Xiao Lai had the cultivation of the 9 transformations of the divine soul, his perception was far inferior to Yi Guqin's. Yi Guqin could already feel the tremors of the horses' hooves coming from the ground behind them. At the same time, there was also the smell of blood. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, a series of blood-red arrows were shot from behind. They left a trail of blood-red afterimages in the air. They were aimed at the carriage and Yi Guqin's men. "Be careful." The sudden attack caused the Xiao family guards around the carriage to turn pale with fright. Xiao Lai's expression also changed. Hearing the whistling sound of the arrows, Madame Zhao's expression changed and she hurriedly lifted the curtain. "Madam, be careful." Seeing the blood-red arrows shooting towards them, Xiao Lai stepped on the horse's back and pulled Madame Zhao's hand, pulling her out of the carriage. "Our daughter is still inside." Madame Zhao screamed. Xiao Lai's expression also changed. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed and he entered the carriage in a flash. At this moment, a blood-red arrow had already shot into the carriage. The thin wooden planks of the carriage were like paper, without the slightest bit of defense. "Ah!" Xiao Wanru's jade-like face turned pale. At this moment, an arm suddenly wrapped around Xiao Wanru's slender waist. Following which, Xiao Wanru felt her delicate body being pulled into a person's embrace. Her fringed long dress was thin and her graceful body was almost pressed tightly against that person's body. Xiao Wanru was just about to struggle when she heard a young man's voice, "Don't move." Yi Guqin stretched out his other hand and caught the blood-red arrow with his bare hands. Xiao Wanru stared blankly, her eyes filled with shock. In the next moment, Yi Guqin tapped his toes and hugged Xiao Wanru as they quickly exited the carriage. Whoosh! 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 The blood-red arrows shot out in succession, turning the carriage into a sieve. "Daughter, no!" Madame Xiao cried out in grief. If Xiao Wanru died, then she would have nothing to do with the Shinto family anymore. To Madame Xiao, who dreamed of being above others, this result was unacceptable. However, 2 figures flew out of the carriage. They were Yi Guqin and Xiao Wanru. "Thank you, little brother," Xiao Lai said emotionally when he saw that Xiao Wanru was unharmed. Seeing this, Madame Zhao's face was also filled with joy, but it suddenly darkened. "Why are you hugging my daughter? Let go of her. She is young Master Shintu Miao's fiancée." As Shintu Miao's fiancée, Madame Xiao naturally did not want to see her being hugged and taken advantage of by another man. Even though Yi Guqin had done this in a moment of desperation to save Xiao Wanru, it still made Madame Xiao unhappy. Chapter 377. Xiao Wanru, who was in Yi Guqin's arms, was a little flustered at first. But after knowing that Yi Guqin was trying to save her, she obediently did not move. The moment Yi Guqin brought her out of the carriage, the wind lifted the black veil that covered Yi Guqin's face, and Xiao Wanru inadvertently caught a glimpse of Yi Guqin's face. So beautiful, Xiao Wanru was stunned for a moment. Yi Guqin's appearance was already handsome, and with those deep, dark eyes, there was a strange attraction. In comparison, Shintu Miao looked like a country bumpkin. Xiao Wanru had only heard of Yi Guqin's deeds, but had never seen him in person, so she did not know that this handsome youth in front of her was the sword master Yi Guqin that she had always yearned for. Just as Xiao Wanru was feeling curious about this youth wearing a bamboo hat, Madame Zhao's sharp voice was heard. "I'm talking to you, quickly put down my daughter. She is not someone you can touch." Madame Xiao screamed like a plucked hen. She had already decided that Xiao Wanru would be the young madam of the Shinto family in the future. How could the young madam of a super family be touched by others? Yiguchen's eyes were cold, and he let go of Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru's face turned red. It was Yiguchen who had saved her life, but her mother still treated Yiguchen in such a tone. "Mother, don't say any more." Xiao Wanru felt a little embarrassed and stomped her feet at Madame Xiao. At the same time, she thought that the youth might be a little angry. But Xiao Wanru was thinking too much. Why would Yiguchen care about such things? His gaze was fixed on the approaching group of figures. The aura of the few barbarians at the front far exceeded that of the surrounding barbarian soldiers. Totem warriors. Yiguchen's eyes showed that he was thinking. This was the first time he had met the true pillars of the barbarians, the totem warriors. He, Xiao family, run. Wu Sang, the leader of the totem warriors, revealed a cold smile at the corners of his mouth, as if he was a vicious wolf. The barbarian soldiers had gradually surrounded them. "Master, quickly take Madam and young Miss away. We'll hold them off." A guard who was injured by an arrow shouted. Because the barbarian tribe's sneak attack was caught off guard, 2 of the guards were directly hit by the arrows and their fighting strength dropped by half. Even if the holy son of the blood barbarian tribe did not come in person, the barbarians in front of them were not people they could casually contend with. Do you think you can escape?" Wu Sang waved his hand. Dozens of barbarian soldiers, including a few totem warriors around him, rushed forward. "Patriarch, hurry up and leave. Don't hesitate." A guard shouted again. "Husband, let's run. Even if you don't think for yourself, you have to think for your daughter." Madame Zhao's face, which was covered with makeup, turned pale from fear when she saw the blood barbarian tribe charging toward them. She still wanted to rely on Xiao Wanru to enter the Shinto family and become the old madam. How could she be willing to die here? "Sigh, you all." Xiao Lai's eyes were filled with guilt. These guards were loyal to the Xiao family, but he could not protect them. However, because of Xiao Wanru, Xiao Lai finally made up his mind. "Little brother, let's go." Xiao Lai did not forget to call Yiguchen. Yiguchen was an outsider. There was no need for him to sacrifice himself and buy time for them. "Husband, don't shout. Since that young man is willing to sacrifice himself for Wanru, let him go." Madame Xiao pulled Xiao Wanru onto a horse. Seeing that Yiguchen did not seem to have any reaction, Xiao Lai sighed deeply. He hardened his heart and turned around, leading Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru far away. "Master, be careful." Xiao Wanru cried out as she was forcefully pulled onto a horse by Madame Xiao. "We can't let that Xiao family girl go. Chase after her." Wu Sang saw the situation and was about to attack. "Damn barbarians, don't even think about chasing after the master. If you want to go, you have to step over my dead body first." Several guards roared, and rushed forward to kill those barbarian soldiers. Then, they started to fight with the totem warriors as well as those barbarian soldiers. Yiguchen's eyes flashed and he also attacked. His target was a totem warrior. "You dare to take the initiative to attack? You're courting death." When the totem warrior saw Yiguchen charging forward, he smiled viciously. He raised the scimitar in his hand and slashed down at Yiguchen. The barbarians were born with divine strength. In addition to the barbarians' unique body-refining techniques, their strength was incomparably strong, far surpassing that of ordinary dynasty warriors. The totem warrior seemed to be able to see the young man in front of him being split in half by his scimitar. However, imagination was just imagination. Who asked him to face Yiguchen? Clang! Yiguchen lightly extended 2 fingers. Under the shocked gaze of the totem warrior, he directly clamped the blade of the scimitar and exerted force. Crack! A good scimitar with spiritual inscriptions was directly broken into 2 pieces. How is this possible? The totem warrior's eyes almost popped out, and his heart was in turmoil. Yi Guqin's gaze was indifferent. He directly stabbed the broken blade into the totem warrior's chest. This totem warrior did not even release his own totem before he was sent flying. He fell to the ground and did not move. Wu Sang, who was about to chase after Xiao Lai and the others, sensed the movement here. He looked over and his face suddenly froze. He saw Yi Guqin's wave-like subtle steps, as if he was a ghost. Every time he attacked, a barbarian would fall. No matter if it was an ordinary soldier or a totem warrior, they would all die in one move. Damn it, there's an expert from the dynasty. Wu Sang's face suddenly changed. As the leader of this small team, he naturally had some experience. At this moment, he did not have time to chase after Xiao Lai and the others who had fled far away. Instead, he took out a cold long blade and directly attacked Yi Guqin. 9 changes of the divine soul. Looking at Wu Sang, Yi Guqin made up his mind. This was a totem warrior whose strength was comparable to the 9 changes of the divine soul. Boy, die. Looking at the blood barbarians falling one by one, Wu Sang's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. The totem power in his body erupted, and the cold blade light broke through the air toward Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin stretched out his hand, and a blood-red long sword with saw-like teeth fell into his hand. It was the bloody hell sword. Vigorous genuine qi poured into the bloody hell sword, directly activating the blood spirit array. A blood-red sword light blasted out and collided with the blade light. Yi Guqin and Wu Sang were locked in a fierce battle. Every time Wu Sang landed, the power of his blade was incomparably vigorous, as if it contained the power of 1,000 caddies. But what shocked Wu Sang was that the seemingly thin youth in front of him calmly received his blade moves without the slightest bit of strain. It was as if the clouds and the wind were blowing lightly. Blood demon body refining technique. Wu Sang shouted loudly. He no longer had the slightest bit of contempt for Yi Guqin, and directly went all out. Blood-red demonic patterns spread on the surface of his body, causing his already strong body to swell like a balloon. Naturally, his strength also increased by several times. Is this the barbarian tribe's body refining technique? Yi Guqin was a little curious. Presumably, the red demonic patterns on Shen Tu Miao's body were also obtained from the barbarian tribe's body refining technique. Boy, take another blade of mine. After his strength multiplied, Wu Sang once again slashed down with his blade. Clang! Yi Guqin casually waved his sword, and Wu Sang's full-powered blade was directly sent flying. The blade shattered inch by inch as it flew out, exploding into fragments. Wu Sang was stunned, and somewhat could not believe what he had seen. Even among the totem warriors, he was considered powerful. But in the end, even after using the body refining technique and increasing his strength by several times, he was still defeated by the youth in front of him with a bamboo hat covering his face. What did this mean? A thought appeared in Wu Sang's mind, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. Damn it, you are not an ordinary dynasty ancient martial art practitioner, but a top genius of the 7 major forces. Wu Sang shouted in shock. Chapter 378. At such a young age, he had such a cultivation and could even block his full blow. It would be strange if he could not guess Yi Guqin's identity. Wu Sang was sure that the young man in front of him must be a top genius carefully cultivated by the 7 forces of the Saint Origin dynasty. Only the holy sons and holy daughters can deal with the top geniuses of the 7 forces. Go back and report to the holy son of Xue Ling. Wu Sang was very decisive, without the slightest hesitation. He knew that in the face of the top geniuses of the 7 forces, even if he had a cultivation comparable to the 9 changes of the divine soul realm, it would be useless. Do you think you can escape? Yi Guqin's eyes were calm. His sword resonated with the void as he displayed the void sword skill, 1,000 waves. The fierce sword wave surged out like a huge wave. It was not only aimed at Wu Sang, but also at the surrounding barbarian tribe soldiers and totem warriors. Puff! 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 The blood barbarians fell to the ground one after another, as if they were harvesting rice. The corners of Wu Sang's eyes twitched when he saw this. He immediately let out a furious roar, and a blood-red light shot out from his chest, forming a blood-red scorpion totem. Elite Totem, Demon Scorpion. With the appearance of the Demon Scorpion totem, Wu Sang's aura soared again. At the same time, a very illusory scorpion tail formed by the power of the blood-red totem emerged from behind him. The tail hook of the scorpion tail bloomed with a sharp light. Obviously, it had a good attack power. Don't think that you can ignore the brave totem warriors just because you are one of the top heaven's prides of the 7 great powers. Wu Sang roared, and the scorpion tail directly pierced towards Yi Guqin. Totem power can be used in this way. Yi Guqin's eyes lit up slightly. The reason why he did not leave when Xiao Lai called him was that he wanted to understand the magical effects of totems through these totem warriors. Yi Guqin also knew some of these magical effects. Immediately, Yi Guqin activated the Azure Dragon totem on his left arm. A misty azure light covered Yi Guqin's left arm. At the same time, it seemed to emit a dragon's roar. Immediately, the green light gathered and attached itself to Yi Guqin's left arm. It looked like the claw of an illusory green dragon. This is... Wu Sang's eyes widened like copper bells. Previously, he was only shocked by Yi Guqin's strength. But now, Wu Sang was completely stunned. At the same time that Yi Guqin activated the Azure Dragon totem, his demonic scorpion totem began to tremble violently, as if it was being suppressed by a superior being. The scorpion's tail, which originally still had some power, also rippled and its power weakened by at least half. How is this possible? That's the highest totem of the Wood tribe. Who are you? Wu Sang's expression changed drastically. It was as if he had just seen something ridiculous. Not only was the young man in front of him the same as him, he had also used the totem possession technique. Moreover, Yi Guqin's totem was suppressing Wu Sang's totem. My demonic scorpion totem is an elite totem, and this young man's totem can suppress me. It's at least a supreme totem. Damn it. That's a totem that only saints and saintesses have. Wu Sang howled in his heart. He could not believe what was happening in front of him. Although he did not know what Yi Guqin's totem was, the suppression from the totem was unquestionable. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed with cold electricity. He reached out his azure dragon claw and grabbed Wu Sang's neck. Even though Wu Sang was tall and strong, he still half knelt down. He was almost unable to breathe because of Yi Guqin's choke. Yi Guqin's eyes were deep as he said, "You're surprised to see this totem? Why? Why do you have a supreme totem? This is something that only saints and saintesses can have. Who are you?" Wu Sang's face turned red. Oh. Yi Guqin looked surprised. No wonder Wu Sang was so surprised when he used the Azure Dragon totem. It turned out that the totem he had was of a very high level. Only saints and saintesses could have it. But Yi Guqin also had doubts. He did not only have one totem, but a total of 5. People like me who have a supreme totem, can only have one. Yi Guqin asked again. He wanted to find out more about the totem. You don't know this. Damn it. You're definitely not a barbarian. But you're not a barbarian. If you have a supreme totem, you'll definitely be judged by the 5 Elements Temple. Wu Sang opened his eyes wide and shouted. The supreme totem was the most precious inheritance even among the barbarians. The barbarians would not allow anyone other than barbarians to have a supreme totem. After that, after confirming that Yi Guqin was not a barbarian, no matter what he asked, Wu Sang did not answer. Yi Guqin did not hesitate and strangled Wu Sang. Although he did not get much information from Wu Sang. But Yi Guqin at least knew. He reckoned that the 5 totems in his body were rare even among the barbarian race. And he could not casually reveal them, at least not with his original identity. It seems that the 5 Elements Temple should have some connection with the 5 totems on my body. But if I fight with my original identity, I won't use the power of the totem. In the future, I can use the totem to blend into the barbarians. Yi Guqin had a plan in mind. He looked around. All the blood barbarians around him were dead. It was a pity that the few loyal guards had also died in the previous battle. Yiguchen sighed slightly. He cut open a deep pit with his sword and buried the bodies of the guards in it. After that, Yiguchen followed the tracks of the horses that Xiao Lai and the others had left behind. His footsteps flashed as he chased after them. He still needed to rely on Xiao Lai and the others to take him to northern Yang City. While Yiguchen was rushing to Xiao Lai and the others, hundreds of miles away, in another city. In the city, fire burned, thick smoke billowed, and the cries of countless people resounded in all directions. The fierce-looking blood barbarian soldiers guarded the 4 entrances and exits of the city, blocking everything. And at the gate of the city, a tall and thin man in a blood-red shirt looked at a trembling girl in front of him with a lustful and cold look on his face. A row of blood barbarian totem warriors stood in 2 rows, and their eyes also revealed an evil look. The man in the blood-red shirt waved one hand, and the clothes of the girl in front of him were directly torn into rags, revealing her snow-white and beautiful body. The man in the blood-red shirt did not have the slightest scruple. In front of all the totem warriors and blood barbarian soldiers present, he pressed the girl to the ground and ravaged her. Not long after, the man in the blood-red shirt got up. The girl was no longer breathing, and a large amount of blood flowed from her lower body. Holy Sun, I have something to report. Suddenly, a totem warrior on horseback rushed over and knelt in front of the man in the blood-red shirt. What's the matter? We lost contact with Wu Sang, the totem warrior said. Oh, did that trash fail? His cultivation is comparable to the divine soul 9 changes, and Xiao Lai was severely injured by me. He should not have much strength left, the man in the blood-red shirt said with a cold look in his eyes. He was a holy son of the blood barbarian tribe, Xue Ling. Holy son, what should we do now? The totem warrior asked. This city is almost finished. Take a group of totem warriors with you and follow me. I left a trick on Xiao Lai, and their whereabouts are always under my control. The holy son of Xue Ling revealed a sinister smile. He slowly raised his hand, and a blood-colored centipede could be vaguely seen in his sleeve. Xiao Wanru, you can't escape from me. The holy son of Xue Ling stuck out his scarlet tongue and licked his lips, his eyes full of lust. Chapter 379. In the desolate Gobi Desert, wind and sand filled the sky. Xiao Lai, Madame Xiao, and Xiao Wanru, who were riding Fergana horses, had been running continuously for a day and a night. Husband, let's stop and rest. Madame Xiao, who was sitting on the horse, panted and complained. How could a woman like her, who had no martial arts cultivation, bear sitting on a bumpy horse for a day and a night? On the other hand, Xiao Wanru, who had a weaker physique, did not complain even though she was exhausted and in pain. Madam, please hold on for a while longer. We can't let our brother's efforts go to waste, Xiao Lai said in a low voice. Those guards had stayed to protect them and fought with the blood barbarians. If they were caught by the blood barbarians because they were resting, they would have let down those loyal guards. But I can't stand it anymore. Can we find a carriage? Madame Xiao complained as she rubbed her aching butt. Riding a horse was not as comfortable as riding a carriage. Madam, don't talk nonsense. We are running for our lives now. Where can we find a carriage for you? Xiao Lai looked helpless. He was the one who had spoiled Madame Xiao. Damn it, the carriage is gone and the guards are dead. It's all because of that young man. If we didn't bring him along, we wouldn't have been so slow and the blood barbarians wouldn't have caught up. Madame Xiao was full of resentment and had nowhere to vent. She directly pushed the blame to Yiguchen. Madam, you are too much. Xiao Lai frowned. Mother, what are you talking about? If that young master didn't save Wanru, she would have died. Xiao Wanru also frowned and felt injustice for Yiguchen. He saved you because he felt guilty for dragging us down. Wanru, don't help others just because they treat you a little better. Madame Zhao's face was stern and her tone was cold when she saw that Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru were speaking for Yi Guqin. Okay, stop talking. Let's continue. Xiao Lai waved his hand and did not want to say anything more. But at this moment, the sound of wind breaking came from afar and a figure flashed quickly. Damn it! Did the blood barbarians catch up? Xiao Lai was shocked. Ah, husband, let's run. Madame Xiao, who had just said that she wanted to rest, suddenly changed her expression. She was more panicked than anyone else. Brother Xiao, it's me. The figure landed. He was wearing a black robe and a bamboo hat. It was Yi Guqin. Little brother, you. Xiao Lai opened his mouth slightly when he saw that it was Yi Guqin. He had never thought that Yi Guqin would be able to escape from the totem warriors of the blood barbarians. It's you didn't die. Madame Xiao, who had a panicked look on her face, also hid her shock. However, her eyes were immediately filled with doubt. That is, it's great. Xiao, the barbarian was Xiao Lai's, and Xiao, and Xiao was Blood's, Xiao's. It's good that little brother is fine. Those guards of my Xiao family. Xiao Lai wanted to say something but stopped. He thought that since Yi Guqin could escape, the guards should be able to escape too. They are all dead, Yi Guqin said truthfully. Sigh, is that so? Hearing this, Xiao Lai's face was filled with disappointment. Although he had expected it, he was still disappointed. However, after hearing Yi Guqin's words, the suspicion in Madame Zhao's eyes intensified. She suddenly opened her mouth and said, could it be that after we left, you left those guards behind and escaped alone? Yi Guqin frowned. He had killed Wu Sang and the rest of the blood barbarians, but in Madame Zhao's eyes, he was a deserter. Madam, this little brother is not that kind of person, Xiao Lai said hurriedly. When Yi Guqin threw out the supreme grade treasure pill, Xiao Lai felt that Yi Guqin was extraordinary. So, he did not suspect Yi Guqin. He was just a little surprised. But Madame Xiao did not think so. She sneered and said, husband, don't side with this person. Those guards are not weak. They are all dead, but this young man escaped alive. This is too strange. Maybe he was bought by the blood barbarians. Madame Zhao's eyes were filled with hostility. Madame Xiao did not have a good impression of Yi Guqin. Now that Yi Guqin had escaped alone, Madame Xiao was even more suspicious of him. Madam, you can't say that, Xiao Lai scolded, which was rare. Mother, what are you talking about? Xiao Wanru was also a little angry. Yi Guqin's eyes darkened. What, you can't say anything? Then tell me, how did you escape? Madame Xiao put her hands on her waist and stared at Yi Guqin. I didn't escape. I killed all the blood barbarians, Yi Guqin said indifferently. Xiao Lai's pupils shrank when he heard this. He knew that it was not easy to kill a group of blood barbarians. There were even powerful totem warriors among them. When Xiao Wanru heard this, she was pleasantly surprised. She looked at Yi Guqin with curiosity in her beautiful eyes. However, Mrs. Xiao couldn't help but laugh mockingly as if she had heard a funny joke. Ha, a young man like you killed a group of blood barbarians. Who do you think you are? Yi Guqin from the sword sect? You can't say such ridiculous things if you want to attract my Wanru's attention. Madame Zhao's eyes were filled with disdain. She thought that Yi Guqin was lying because he liked Xiao Wanru and wanted to attract her attention and worship. If that's the case, then I'll take my leave, Yi Guqin said coldly. With his personality, he did not want to argue with a woman. Since Madame Xiao questioned him, Yi Guqin could leave. Because of his relationship with Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru, Yi Guqin did not mind escorting them to northern Yang City. But since others questioned him, Yi Guqin did not need to help them. At most, he could find someone else to find out the route to northern Yang City. Little brother, please wait. Madame Xiao is ignorant. Please don't mind her. Xiao Lai hurriedly said when he saw that Yi Guqin was about to leave. Madame Xiao was ignorant, but Xiao Lai knew. He guessed that Yi Guqin's background was not that simple. He might be an outstanding disciple of a large family. Xiao Lai could not afford to offend such a person. Young master, Wanru apologizes on behalf of my mother. Xiao Wanru bowed to Yi Guqin. Madame Xiao gritted her teeth when she saw that her daughter and husband were siding with Yi Guqin. Her face turned green and white. You. Why are you all siding with this outsider? As long as we can escape to northern Yang City, we will be part of the Shinto family. You are lowering your status by doing this. Shut up. Xiao Lai shouted coldly. For the first time, he was imposing. Xiao Lai, you. Madame Zhao's face was ashen, but she did not say anything in the end. She only glared angrily at Yi Guqin. Although Yi Guqin disliked Madame Xiao, he still had a good impression of Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru. So Yi Guqin stayed in the end. Chapter 380. Yi Guqin and the other three continued their journey towards northern Yang City. Another 2 days passed in this manner. They encountered a few waves of barbarians. Fortunately, they were not from the blood barbarians and were mostly ordinary barbarian tribe soldiers. Therefore, Yi Guqin did not make a move. Xiao Lai alone was enough to solve the problem. However, this made Madame Xiao look at Yi Guqin with even more disdain. In her opinion, they were protecting Yi Guqin, not the other way around. Yi Guqin was helping them. Yi Guqin did not care about this and completely ignored Madame Zhao's harsh gaze. He felt a little uneasy. The blood barbarians would not give up on their prey so easily. Moreover, he knew from Xiao Lai that the holy son of the blood barbarian tribe was a very cruel and ruthless person. He would not let them off so easily. However, Yi Guqin was not afraid. He also wanted to meet the prodigies of the barbarian tribe. He wanted to see how the so-called holy son and holy daughter were compared to the top prodigies of the 7 major forces. At night, the celestial emperor's sword turned into a bright moon and scattered its cold light. Yi Guqin and the other three sat around the bonfire. It had been a few days and there was no trace of the blood barbarians. Not to mention Madame Xiao, even Xiao Lai thought that they had shaken off the blood barbarians. Therefore, under Madame Zhao's strong request, Xiao Lai chose to rest. Brother Xiao, I think we should hurry. The blood barbarians will not give up so easily. Yi Guqin was still a little vigilant. Before Xiao Lai could say anything, Madame Xiao immediately screamed, "What are you talking about? Have you done anything to deal with the barbarian race in the past 2 days? Wasn't it my husband who did it? Look at you now, you're sitting here pointing fingers at us. We've already shaken off the blood barbarian race, how could they possibly catch up?" Madame Xiao was already full of resentment towards Yi Guqin. Now, she vented her anger and pointed at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin's face turned slightly cold. Even with his indifferent personality, he felt a trace of impatience towards Madame Xiao. If it weren't for Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru, Yi Guqin would have left long ago. Alright, let's not talk too much. Little brother, aren't you a little too nervous? We will reach northern Yang City in a few days, so you can be at ease. Even Xiao Lai heaved a sigh of relief at this moment. However, Xiao Lai suddenly started coughing violently. Father, what's wrong? Xiao Wanru hurriedly went forward and pounded Xiao Lai's back. Big brother Xiao, didn't you take the pill? Yi Guqin suddenly frowned. Logically speaking, the effects of the supreme rank pellet that he had given Xiao Lai should have been very strong. However, Xiao Lai was still coughing and looked a little weak. It's nothing. It's just that my chest feels a little tight. Xiao Lai waved his hand and said. A dark light flashed in Yi Guqin's eyes as he said, "Big brother Xiao, please take a look at my wound." Xiao Lai was slightly taken aback when he heard this. He didn't think much about it and directly pulled open the front of his shirt. There was a blood-red palm print that looked like it was about to fester. Vaguely, there seemed to be something wriggling under the skin. Could it be? Yiguchin directly went forward and raised his palm. The heavenly sun dark fire spewed out. Yiguchin controlled the strange fire's temperature and directly slapped the blood-red palm print on Xiao Lai's chest. Ah! Xiao Lai was caught off guard and suddenly let out a scream. What are you doing? Madame Xiao screamed in shock. Xiao Wanru was also stunned for a moment. The strange fire burned Xiao Lai's chest, and the festering skin was directly charred black. Accompanied by a hissing sound, a blood-red insect seemed to be unable to withstand the strange fire's temperature and rushed out. Yiguchin pinched the blood-red insect with one hand. His eyes focused, and the flames rose and burned it to ashes. Little brother, that is. Xiao Lai was sweating profusely and said weakly. It should be the goo of the blood barbarian tribe, Yiguchin said in a deep voice. Although he did not understand the methods of the blood barbarian tribe, he had the spirit star soul devouring parasite in his body before, so he knew a little about the goo. Thank you, little brother, for saving my life, Xiao Lai said gratefully. After getting rid of the goo, he clearly felt that his body was much more relaxed. Madame Zhao's face was a little embarrassed and unnatural. Just now, she was still shouting, thinking that Yiguchin had revealed his true colors and wanted to kill Xiao Lai. In the end, he was treating Xiao Lai. However, she did not have the intention to apologize to Yiguchin. She just pretended that nothing had happened and sat aside. The way Xiao Wanru looked at Yiguchin was also filled with a strange and curious look. Yiguchin's face was still a little dignified. He said to himself in his heart, it seems that the journey to northern Yang City will not be too peaceful. Yiguchin vaguely guessed that the function of this blood-red goo should not only be to destroy the body, but also to let the caster of the goo obtain information about the location of the goo. And at the moment when Yiguchin burned the goo worms with his strange fire. In another place, the blood spirit saint, who was dressed in a blood-red robe, had a slight change in expression, and then a playful look appeared on his face. With Xiao Lai's cultivation level, he could actually discover my method. But it doesn't matter. It's impossible for you to escape to northern Yang City alive. The blood spirit saint's eyes were cold. He held a blood-red goo in his hand, which was exactly the same as the one in Xiao Lai's body. On the other side, Yiguchin sat quietly beside the bonfire with his eyes closed. He already had a guess in his heart that it was impossible to reach northern Yang City safely. Then Yiguchin could only recuperate and wait for the battle with the blood barbarian tribe saint. At this moment, Xiao Wanru, who was wearing a tasseled long dress, sat silently beside Yiguchin. Xiao Wanru glanced at Yiguchin and said, "Young master, thank you for saving my father." Yiguchin opened his eyes slightly and said lightly, "It's no big deal. It's just a matter of convenience." Xiao Wanru said apologetically, "Also, about mother. She has such a character. I hope you don't mind." Wanru apologizes to you on behalf of mother. Looking at the considerate and gentle girl in front of him, Yiguchin nodded slightly. "I won't care about this kind of thing." Xiao Wanru blinked and said, "Young master is really magnanimous. By the way, Wanru still doesn't know your name." "My surname is Yi," Yiguchin said lightly. "Yi." Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes suddenly narrowed, and her expression froze slightly. Then, she laughed and said, "Young master and Yiguchin of the sword sect have the same surname." Xiao Wanru naturally wouldn't associate the young man in front of her with the sword sect. After all, Yiguchin was already dead. Xiao Wanru instinctively ruled it out. "Is that so?" "So what?" Yiguchin didn't care. Young master should know the name of the sword sect. Wanru truly yearns for such a peerless sword cultivator. Unfortunately, I'm not fated to meet him in this life. It's even impossible to find someone similar to him. Xiao Wanru sighed when she thought about how she was going to marry Shintu Miao. What's so good about the sword sect? Even with a sword in hand, they can't protect the people around them. Yiguchin looked at the bonfire and thought about Su Jianshi, who had been unconscious until now. He thought about Situ Hongxue and Mu Xingzu. He sighed and said with a sigh. However, when Xiao Wanru heard this, the smile on her face disappeared, and her expression turned solemn. Young Master Yi, although Wanru admires you, please don't slander Yi Guqin so easily. He's not someone you can casually comment on. Yi Guqin was a little stunned when he heard this. He felt a little self-reproachful, but in Xiao Wanru's eyes, he was slandering the sword sect. Even Yi Guqin was a little speechless. Xiao Wanru originally had a good impression of Yi Guqin, but after hearing Yi Guqin's words, her interest waned. She thought that the young man in front of her was a little arrogant and had casually commented on the sword sect. She couldn't help but feel disappointed. Young master, Wanru will go rest first. Xiao Wanru returned to Madame Zhao's side. Madame Zhao was overjoyed when she saw that her daughter seemed to have some conflict with Yi Guqin. She looked at Yi Guqin with a teasing smile in her eyes. It's impossible for a toad to want to eat a swan's meat. My daughter will arrive in northern Liang City in a few days and will be the young mistress of the Shintu family. Not just anyone can match up to her. Madame Zhao's tone was a little proud. She glanced at Yi Guqin with a trace of disdain in her eyes. Yi Guqin ignored her. With Yi Guqin's true strength, even Shintu Miao could only kneel in front of him. Therefore, it was hard to say who was the toad and who was the swan. Chapter 381. After a night's rest, Yi Guqin and the other three had recovered some energy. After another day, a canyon suddenly appeared in front of Yi Guqin and the others. There was only one road in the canyon. It was narrow and long, extending into the distance. When Xiao Lai saw this gorge, his eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. He turned to look at Yi Guqin, and said with a hint of joy in his voice, "Little brother, after we pass through this natural moat gorge, we'll be less than 2 days away from northern Liang City. Moreover, the barbarian tribe's sphere of influence hasn't expanded to this place yet. As long as we pass through this natural moat gorge, we'll be safe." Hearing this, Madame Xiao and Xiao Wanru also breathed a sigh of relief and smiled. After all, the pursuit and escape along the way had been mentally and physically exhausting. After entering this canyon, there is only one road. If we are blocked from the front and back, it will be a dead end, Yi Guqin said indifferently without any joy on his face. Little brother, are you worried that there will be an ambush in the natural moat gorge? I don't think so. We have already shaken off the blood barbarian tribe. They don't know where we are, Xiao Lai said. Ah, I think you are worried that you will not have a chance to meet Wanru after we reach northern Liang City. After all, with her identity, you will not be able to meet her in the future. So, you hope that we will not reach northern Liang City so quickly, right? Madame Xiao said with a hint of sarcasm. She thought that Yi Guqin was deliberately delaying their arrival in northern Liang City so that he would have more opportunities to meet Xiao Wanru. All right, mother, don't slander young master anymore, Xiao Wanru rebuked with a slightly red face. In fact, Xiao Wanru had a good impression of this handsome young man who had saved her life. However, Yi Guqin's evaluation of the sword sect by the bonfire that night made Xiao Wanru's impression of Yi Guqin drop a little. However, she was still grateful to Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin did not bother to talk to Madame Xiao again. He looked at the heavenly moat gorge and frowned. Yi Guqin knew in his heart that Xiao Lai and Madame Xiao were too anxious to listen to his warning. Therefore, Yi Guqin simply didn't say anything and followed Xiao Lai and the others into the narrow canyon road. The canyon was narrow and dimly lit. The four of them rode their horses forward. Xiao Lai and Madame Xiao rode at the front, Xiao Wanru was in the middle, and Yi Guqin was at the back. Madame Xiao urged the horse forward impatiently. Her powdered face revealed an uncontrollable joy, as if northern Liang City was already right in front of her. But at this moment, from the depths of the dim and narrow road ahead, more than a dozen flashing arrows suddenly burst out, and the sound of breaking winds suddenly rang out. That sharp aura caused Xiao Lai's expression to drastically change. Boom! Madam, be careful. Xiao Lai took out a long blade from his origin ring. As the blade spun, it danced in the air and blocked the arrows. However, there was still an arrow that managed to escape from the gap in the net of blades and pierced through Madame Xiao's shoulder. Ah! Madame Xiao, who was immersed in the beautiful fantasy of the future, suddenly felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. Her entire body was thrown off the horse by the inertia of the arrow and fell to the ground. Her face was covered in dirt, and she clutched her shoulder as she screamed like a chicken being slaughtered. Madam! Mother! Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru's expressions changed as they hurriedly dismounted and helped Madame Xiao up. Ah, pain, pain. I'm going to die. A bloody hole appeared on Madame Xiao's shoulder as she screamed incessantly. Yi Gu Chen's facial expression was calm. He looked ahead. About 5 or 6 totem warriors were wearing blood-red armors. They were walking towards him from the dim and narrow road. Their faces were filled with a cruel and bloodthirsty look. Xiao family patriarch, you are really stupid. Are you in such a hurry to walk into a trap? A totem warrior sneered. There really is an ambush. Xiao Lai gripped the long blade in his hand tightly, his mouth full of bitterness. He once again looked at Yi Guchen, who was wearing a bamboo hat, with a trace of regret in his eyes. If he had listened to Yi Guchen's words, he would not have ended up like this. Madame Zhao's face was also pale, and her lips were trembling because of the pain. Her hair was in a mess, and her face was covered in dirt. Yi Guchen had warned them before, but they did not listen. Madame Xiao even thought that Yi Guchen only wanted to slow them down. Now, the totem warriors of the blood barbarian tribe were in front of them, and he still called them stupid. This made Madame Zhao's face turn green and white. She was a little embarrassed. Since you knew that there might be an ambush, why didn't you forcibly stop us? Why did you hurt me? I will be the old madam of the Shinto family in the future. Madame Xiao covered her shoulder and cried out in pain. At the same time, she blamed Yi Guchen. Mother, you are injured. Don't talk so much. Xiao Wanru pressed the wound on Madame Zhao's shoulder and said. Yi Guchen coldly glanced at Madame Xiao and did not say anything. He turned to look at the totem warriors. Little brother, please take Madame and Wanru back the way we came. I will stop them. Xiao Lai held his blade and said while gritting his teeth. Yi Guchen was indifferent. Little brother. Xiao Lai looked at Yi Guchen, who did not move. He was anxious and puzzled at the same time. Sigh, I said that once we enter this place, it is a dead end. There is no way out. Yi Guchen sighed slightly. Just as Xiao Lai was about to say something, a cold snake-like voice suddenly sounded from behind Yi Guchen and the other three. Xiao Lai, you are so stupid that it is ridiculous. At the other end of the narrow road, there was also a group of people blocking their way out. The one who spoke was a man in a blood-red shirt. He had a cold and playful smile on his face. His eyes swept over Xiao Lai and the others as if he was looking at dead people. Only when he swept his gaze over Xiao Wanru did his eyes become lustful. Blood Spirit Holy Son, why are you here? Xiao Lai looked at the man in the blood-red shirt. His pupils suddenly shrank as he cried out involuntarily. Oh, didn't you discover the blood-seeking goo poison yourself? The Blood Spirit Holy Son looked at Xiao Lai in surprise. Xiao Lai's heart skipped a beat, and he immediately understood. It turned out that the goo poison in his chest was left by the Blood Spirit Holy Son to track them. However, Xiao Lai had not discovered it. Instead, it was Yi Guchen who had discovered it. Thinking of this, Xiao Lai felt ashamed again. If he had listened to Yi Guchen more, they would not have fallen into such a desperate situation. How can the prey that I have set my eyes on escape so easily? Wanru, don't worry, I will treat you well soon. The Blood Spirit Holy Son stared at Xiao Wanru and licked his lips with his scarlet tongue. That kind of sinister and lustful gaze made Xiao Wanru's delicate body tremble violently. The blood barbarian tribe, even among the ferocious barbarian tribes, was the most cruel and bloodthirsty. Not to mention that the blood spirit Holy Sun had a somewhat perverted personality. Even a quick death would be a luxury if one fell into his hands. As for you, Xiao Lai, you can die peacefully. And your old wife, I feel disgusted just by looking at her. It's not a bad idea to give her to the warriors under my command. The blood spirit Holy Sun looked at Mrs. Xiao with disgust. Lord Holy Sun, we don't want that kind of old woman with loose lower body. But my ferocious ape might like her. A totem warrior laughed evilly. Madame Xiao, who was already injured, was so angry that she almost vomited blood when she heard such vicious words. But she was also very scared. Her body trembled like a sieve. If she was really raped by a beast, it would be thousands of times more painful than being executed by 1,000 cuts. Mrs. Zhao's face was covered in tears and snot because of fear. She looked extremely miserable. My daughter is young Master Shinto Miao's fiancée. I will also be the old madam of the Shinto family in the future. The Shinto family will not let you off for treating me like this. Mrs. Xiao said in a trembling voice. She hoped that by mentioning the Shinto family, the blood spirit Holy Sun would have some scruples. But the blood spirit Holy Sun laughed when he heard this. What is the Shinto family? What is that trash Shinto Miao? You are really taking advantage of a chicken feather as an arrow. Just nice, let me have a taste of someone else's fiancé. The blood spirit Holy Sun was not afraid of the Shinto family. Instead, he was even more excited. Mrs. Xiao saw this and her face turned pale. She did not expect that by mentioning the Shinto family, it would backfire. The barbarians pressed forward step by step. Xiao Wanru's face was filled with despair. She even had the intention to die. She would rather die than be tainted by the blood spirit Holy Sun. Xiao Lai also had the intention to fight to the death. Sigh, just when Xiao Lai, Xiao Wanru, and the rest were ready to die, a sigh was heard. This sigh reverberated in the narrow canyon and was exceptionally clear. At this moment, even the blood spirit Holy Sun's gaze could not help but fall on the source of the sigh. It was a figure in black with a bamboo hat on his head. Blood spirit Holy Sun, is it? Among the barbarian Holy Sons, I will start with you. Chapter 382. Hearing Yi Guqin's words, everyone was stunned. How arrogant must he be to say that he wanted to kill the barbarian Holy Sun? Although the blood barbarian tribe was not the most powerful tribe in the barbarian tribe, its strength was not to be underestimated. Some of the holy sons and holy daughters of the blood barbarian tribe were quite powerful. They had even fought with some of the geniuses of the 7 superpowers. Therefore, when the saint of Xue Ling heard this unknown young man say such words, he scratched his ears, thinking that he had misheard. Is it because you think you're about to die that your mind is in a mess? The blood spirit Holy Sun was not angry. He just sneered, thinking that Yi Guqin was too flustered to be in a clear state of mind. Not only the Holy Son of Xue Ling, but also the surrounding totem warriors laughed out loud, as if they had heard the funniest joke in the world. The Holy Son of the barbarian race is not someone that any random person can provoke. That's right. Even the top geniuses of the 7 superpowers dare not say such arrogant words. Many totem warriors looked at Yi Guqin as if they were looking at a dead man. Even Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru were stunned, let alone the barbarian tribe. Xiao Lai knew that the young man in front of him might have some background. Maybe he was a genius disciple of a big family. But even so, he was not qualified to say such words to the barbarian Holy Sun. As for Madame Xiao, she was even more disheartened. She said, "You are about to die. Why are you still talking nonsense?" Madame Xiao burst into tears. She was about to become the old madam of a super family, but she was intercepted and killed here. This made her feel so sad that she wanted to die. Seeing everyone's attitude, Yi Guqin sighed slightly. Why did no one believe him when he told the truth? He said no more. He slowly raised his hand and poured genuine qi into his veins. He flicked his fingers continuously at lightning speed. Whoosh! 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 The 6 pulses divine sword was launched. Suddenly, a series of real chi fingers darted out, and darted towards the totem warriors who were blocking the road ahead. Yiguchen's action was too abrupt. Not to mention the totem warriors, even the holy son of Xueling was stunned. Suddenly, a series of blood-curdling screams resounded. The heads and hearts of the totem warriors who were standing in front of them had been pierced through by the real chi. Blood splashed out, and pieces of flesh flew in all directions. Xiao Lai was stunned. Although those totem warriors were not particularly powerful, it would still take him a lot of effort to deal with them. However, Yiguchen had only flicked his finger, and those totem warriors had immediately died. They didn't have the slightest power to resist. Hurry up and leave. Yiguchen shouted in a low voice. Xiao Lai came to his senses and his eyes shone with extreme joy, as if he had been saved from a dead end. At that moment, he did not have the time to consider Yiguchen's strength and identity. He grabbed Xiao Wanru with one hand and Madame Xiao with the other, mounted a Fergana horse and galloped forward. Young master, be careful. Xiao Wanru couldn't help but exclaim when she saw Yiguchen's frail figure remaining where he was. At that moment, Yiguchen's lone figure gradually overlapped with the hazy and peerless figure in her heart. If I have to imagine what the sword master looks like, then it should be very similar to him, Xiao Wanru thought to herself as she stared at Yiguchen's back. Although Xiao Wanru had misunderstood Yiguchen's casual words as slandering the sword master, she was a little unhappy. But now, Yiguchen's figure, which was left behind by himself, touched Xiao Wanru's heart. There was a ripple in her heart. However, Xiao Wanru also knew that with Madame Zhao's attitude, it was impossible for her to have any interaction with this young man of unknown origin. Her fate was only to become Shintu Miao's wife. The holy son of Xueling remained calm as he watched Xiao Lai and the others leave. He wasn't in a hurry to catch Xiao Lai. They couldn't run too far with an injured woman. What attracted the holy son of Xueling's attention was the mysterious young man wearing a bamboo hat in front of him. Even a fool would know that Yiguchen was extraordinary when he saw him casually kill a group of totem warriors. Although the holy son of Xueling was cruel and perverted, he wasn't stupid. He knew that the young man in front of him was extraordinary. Who are you? The holy son of Xueling's tone had a rare trace of seriousness. The power of Yiguchen's 6 meridian godly sword had made him frown. The person who will kill you, Yiguchen said lightly. Arrogant boy. The holy son of Xueling hadn't moved yet, but the group of totem warriors around him roared. The holy son and holy daughter of the barbarian tribe had a high status and were respected. These totem warriors naturally couldn't be indifferent. Accompanied by bursts of roars and surging blood light, these totem warriors directly activated their own totems. Blood Sky Toad, Blood Ardent Bird, Blood-Sucking Demonic Mosquito, elite totems of the Blood Barbarian tribe emerged from the totem warriors' bodies, blooming with blood light. Their auras also surged like a geyser. Kill! A group of totem warriors rushed forward. With the help of the totem power, their moves were more powerful. At the same time, they could also perform some totem possession skills. But these moves were useless against Yiguchen. He withdrew the Netharism broadsword with a flip of his hand, and the wide and heavy pitch-black body of the sword was like a shield that completely blocked all these moves. Then, Yiguchen's heavy sword swept out. The vigorous sword chi was like a wave, spreading out with him as the origin. Puff! 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 The totem warriors were hit by this sword wave. They spat out mouthfuls of blood along with their broken organs. They were sent flying upside down like kites with broken strings. The ferocious sword ripples shattered their internal organs. Yiguchen only swept out with his sword, and this group of totem warriors had suffered heavy casualties. They could no longer fight. Are you from the 7 forces? There was no trace of contempt or ridicule in the blood spirit saint's eyes. If he still looked down on Yiguchen now, He would be really stupid. The blood spirit saint took out a blood-red bone whip, which looked like it was pieced together by vertebrae. A strong blood-red totem power wrapped around the bone whip. No matter who you are, since you have provoked me, you can only die. But I won't kill you immediately. Instead, I will cut off your limbs and throw you into the hemolytic demon pool. I will let you watch your body melt bit by bit. The blood spirit saint waved the blood-red bone whip with a cruel smile on his face. Yiguchen's eyes were indifferent. Most of the barbarians were cruel, and the blood barbarian specialized in the Tao of blood and had many cruel means. Yiguchen's main purpose in coming to the great wilderness mansion was not to deal with the barbarians. But in the face of such a cruel and bloody barbarian tribe, Yiguchen would not show mercy. Chapter 383. The Saint of Blood Spirit dashed forward, holding the scarlet bone whip in his hand, and lashed it at Yiguchen. Yiguchen waved his Xianming heavy sword and chopped down. A terrifying shock wave spread out. The Saint of Blood Spirit narrowed his eyes, and a strong scarlet totem power spread out from his body. His whip whizzed out like a scarlet python. Yiguchen blocked the attack with his sword. The Xianming heavy sword was like a thick shield, blocking the attack of the scarlet bone whip. Clang! The bone whip and the heavy sword collided, and sparks burst out with the sound of metal clashing. However, to the Saint of Blood Spirit's surprise, Yiguchen did not take a step back despite the power of his whip. You have some skills. At this moment, the Saint of Blood Spirit stopped looking down on Jian Wushuang. In his eyes, this young man with a bamboo hat was a strong opponent on the same level. You are a genius from the 7 superpowers. The Saint of Blood Spirit held the scarlet bone whip tightly. You talk a lot of nonsense. Yiguchen looked indifferent. He swung his sword again. The Xianming heavy sword seemed to have the power to destroy everything. A fierce sword wave spread out and cracked the narrow road in front of him. You are too arrogant. The Saint of Blood Spirit's eyes darkened. Even the geniuses from the 7 superpowers were on the same level as them. Yiguchen's indifferent attitude and tone made it seem that he did not take the Saint of Blood Spirit seriously at all. The Saint of Blood Spirit rushed forward with the whip in one hand, and the other hand suddenly reached out. Vigorous blood-red totem power gathered in his arm, making his arm look like it was made of fresh blood. His entire arm was a strange dark red. Blood Demon Hand. The Saint of Blood Spirit's bone whip wrapped around Yiguchen's Xianming heavy sword, and then he swung it hard. Yiguchen's heavy sword immediately moved to one side. Then, Saint Son of Xue Ling's Blood Demon Hand slapped hard at Yiguchen's chest. Yiguchen also reached out his other hand and added half of the power of the invincible Vajra body. The golden light on his palm was tinged with cyan light. He clashed with the Blood Demon Hand of the Blood Demon. Bang! True Qi collided with the totem power, bursting out a circle of ripples. Xue Ling Holy Sun's expression suddenly changed the moment they exchanged blows. Yangming felt a terrifying force crushing down on him inch by inch from his arm, and he could even clearly hear the sound of his bones cracking. Cough! The Saint of Xue Ling retreated quickly. The Blood Demon arm was trembling violently. However, although he was surprised by Yiguchen's terrifying strength, there was still a sinister sneer on his face as he said, "This Blood Demon's hand is mixed with 49 types of blood poison of my blood barbarian tribe. Even a divine soul expert will die upon contact. Boy, you are still too inexperienced." Saint Son of Xue Ling sneered, as if his plan had succeeded and he was sure of victory. Yiguchen raised his hand slightly and saw a layer of dark red blood poison spreading from his palm to his arm. However, Yiguchen did not care at all. His invincible Vajra body was extremely resistant to all kinds of poisons. In his body, there were also the heavenly fire and heavenly thunder, which could naturally restrain all kinds of poisons. Yiguchen operated his body slightly, and the heavenly sun Xianming fire and purple void thunder were transmitted to his arm along his tendons and meridians. There was a sizzling sound coming from Yiguchen's arm. The thick dark red blood poison directly turned into white smoke, rising and being annihilated. This. Saint Son of Xueling's eyes almost popped out when he saw Yiguchen's arm was as good as new. Because he was the saint of the blood barbarian tribe, he clearly knew the power of the blood poison. He had once used the blood demon hand to poison some talents of the 7 superpowers to death and turn them into a pool of blood. You think you can kill me with this unorthodox method? Yiguchen's lips curled into a trace of coldness. He directly used the shadow steps, and his body moved quickly, leaving behind a residual shadow, rushing toward Saint Son of Xueling. Saint Son of Xueling's eyelids twitched. Only then did he realize that the young man in front of him was difficult to deal with. It could be said that if Yiguchen was not afraid of the blood poison, then Saint Son of Xueling's various methods would be weakened by at least 30%. Blood Bomb. Saint Son of Xueling released all his totem power, which rolled and condensed into balls of blood-red energy light, and rushed toward Yiguchen. Yiguchen loosened his hand and put the Xianming heavy sword back into the natal ring. The Xianming heavy sword had the effect of suppressing genuine qi. The moment it left his hand, Yiguchen's genuine qi burst out and speed soared again. That ghostly speed made Saint Son of Xueling break out in a cold sweat. Yiguchen directly passed through the balls of blood-red energy light. With a flip of his hand, he held the blood prison sword in his hand. Saint Son of Xueling lashed out the blood-red bone whip in his hand again, and it directly hit Yiguchen's body. However, before Saint Son of Xueling could smile, he was shocked to find that the bone whip had directly passed through Yiguchen's body. Then, in the next moment, Saint Son of Xueling felt his hair stand on end and his spine tremble. Oh no! Saint Son of Xueling hurriedly moved aside. A blood-red long sword directly penetrated his shoulder from the back. The piercing pain made Saint Son of Xueling scream. Yiguchen's eyes were cold. He had used the shadow-killing swordsmanship, instant kill. Puff! Yiguchen raised his sword, and Saint Son of Xueling's left arm was directly cut off. It fell to the ground, and blood spurted out. Ah! Saint Son of Xueling screamed again. In desperation, he shook his sleeve, and a blood shadow suddenly rushed toward Yiguchen. Yiguchen's figure suddenly retreated, and the blood shadow directly increased in size. In the end, it turned into a blood-red centipede that was 3 feet long. Demonic beast. Seeing the blood-red centipede, Yiguchen was not surprised. The barbarian tribe was also very good at taming demonic beasts and making them their trump card. Many experts of the dynasties were very afraid to fight with the barbarian tribe one-on-one because the barbarian tribe had the means to tame demonic beasts, which was equivalent to fighting 1 against 2. However, Yiguchen's eyes did not waver at all. On the other side, Saint Son of Xueling picked up the broken arm on the ground and looked at Yiguchen with great resentment. You are definitely from the 7 superpowers, but do you think that as the Saint Son of the blood barbarian tribe, this is all I can do? Saint Son of Xueling said coldly, and directly put the broken arm on his shoulder. Dense blood light spread out. Saint Son of Xueling took out another blood bottle and raised his head to drink the viscous liquid. The next moment, Yiguchen saw countless blood-red tentacles spread out from the broken arm and the incision. They connected with each other, and finally the whole arm was intact. Saint Son of Xueling shook the arm, and a cruel sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Maybe you don't know that the blood medicine extracted from the hemolytic demon pool of our blood barbarian tribe can heal any injury, no matter how serious it is. Now, it's your turn. On the surface of Saint Son of Xueling, a dense blood-red light shone out, and finally formed a totem with terrible pressure. The supreme totem of the blood barbarian tribe, the 1,000-legged blood centipede. Chapter 384. The status and cultivation potential of the barbarian tribe depended on their totems. The higher the level of the totem, the greater the power and talent of the totem. For example, Wu Sang was able to become a team leader because his totem was the elite demon scorpion totem. When the saint of Xueling released his own totem, Yi Guqian could clearly feel the difference brought by the different levels of totems. A totem with a bloody and evil aura was released from the saint's body. The totem looked like a crouching centipede, but it was blood red and looked quite scary. This was the reason why Xueling was able to become the saint of the blood barbarian tribe. The supreme totem, thousand-legged blood centipede. When the supreme totem was released, Yi Guqian clearly felt that the aura of Saint of Xueling's whole body had increased by a large margin. It was as if Yi Guqian had performed the soul-devouring secret skill. And this thousand-legged blood centipede totem was obviously much more powerful than Wu Sang's demon scorpion totem. There was only one level difference between the elite and the supreme totem, but there was a huge difference in their attributes and abilities. Otherwise, there would not be such a big difference between the saint and the saintess and the totem warriors. How about it, kid? Are you scared now? The saint straightened his back. The surging totem power in his body gave him great confidence. And there was a demonic centipede beast beside him that was comparable to the 8th transformation of the godly soul realm. With such strength, the saint knew that he could even fight top geniuses such as Xian Hao, the young war emperor, and LV Qinghan, not to mention some ordinary geniuses from the 7 superpowers. It should be known that even the ordinary saint and the saintess did not dare to fight with those top geniuses. Only the double crown king dared to fight with them. The saint thought that the young man in front of him was at most an ordinary genius from the 7 superpowers. It was impossible for him to be one of those top geniuses. However, the saint did not see a trace of fear in Yi Guqian. Yi Guqian's eyes were shining. Is this the supreme totem? Yi Guqian had always wanted to understand what level the totem in his body was at. The thousand-legged blood centipede totem of Saint Xueling was indeed much more powerful than the magic scorpion. However, in Yi Guqian's estimation, it was still inferior to the totem on his 5-color golden core. Could it be that the 5-colored golden core totem in my body is of a higher level than the supreme totem? Yi Guqian was puzzled. In the barbarian tribe, the supreme totem was already qualified to become a holy son or holy daughter. What kind of status did the totem above the supreme totem have in the barbarian tribe? Yi Guqian was suddenly curious. Brat, you are far too arrogant. Let me show you what it means to be a supreme totem. Seeing that Yi Guqian was not afraid at all, the saint of Xueling's face turned cold. As the saint of the blood barbarian tribe, it was unforgivable for him to be looked down upon. The saint of Xueling swung the bone whip again. This time, the power of the bone whip was far more powerful than before. The air screeched. Yi Guqian held the blood prison sword and injected his genuine qi into it. A sharp blood light gushed out. He swung his sword and collided with the bone whip, creating a blast of air. With the help of the thousand-legged blood centipede totem, the saint of Xueling's strength soared. He rushed forward and fought with Yi Guqian. The totem power and genuine qi collided, causing the entire natural moat gorge to roar. Hiss! At this moment, the demonic centipede beast also rushed forward. Its sharp mouthparts were like 2 machetes, biting toward Yi Guqian. Die! The saint of Xueling's eyes were cruel, as if he could see Yi Guqian being cut in half. Then, Yi Guqian looked extremely calm. He directly activated the vermilion bird totem on his chest. The strong power of the flame totem turned into a pair of gorgeous fire wings on his back. With a slight vibration, Yi Guqian flew up into the air, and the demonic centipede beast missed. This is... When Yi Guqian took out the vermilion bird totem, the saint of Xueling's face suddenly froze. Then, as if he had seen the most terrifying thing in his life, his eyes, which had been filled with cruelty, trembled. Because when Yi Guqian released the vermilion bird totem, the saint of Xueling felt that his thousand-legged blood centipede totem was shaking and being suppressed. Even his supreme totem's power was reduced by about 30%. How is this possible? Is this the ancestral totem? The saint of Xueling let out an unprecedented roar. He could not believe it. Ancestral totem. Yi Guqian, who was flying in the air, heard the saint of Xueling's words and raised his eyebrows. According to his tone, the ancestral totem should be of a higher level than the supreme totem. No, impossible, absolutely impossible. You are not from the barbarian tribe. How can you have the ancestral totem? Tell me, what kind of trick did you use? The saint of Xue Ling gritted his teeth and let out an unwilling roar. It was absolutely impossible for a non-barbarian to have the ancestral totem. The ancestral totem was the supreme barbarian tribe. If someone could get the ancestral totem, his status would be higher than that of the saint and holy maiden. Moreover, the totem Yi Guqin released was the fire attribute totem, which was specially used to restrain the blood barbarian tribe. Therefore, the saint of Xue Ling could not believe it, nor did he want to believe it. Yi Guqin's eyes flashed. It seemed that the 5-color golden core and the 5 totems on it were more valuable than he had imagined. Even among the barbarian tribe, it was absolutely rare. However, now that Yi Guqin had shown the ancestral totem, it meant that the saint of Xue Ling had to die. Because Yi Guqin could not let the barbarian tribe know that he had the ancestral totem. Once the news leaked out, Yi Guqin would not only be targeted by the barbarian tribe, but it would also be difficult for him to blend in with the barbarian tribe. Therefore, the saint of Xue Ling had to die. Yi Guqin slowly raised his hand. The crimson divine fire of the rosefinch gushed out from the totem and rose up in his palm. The saint of Xue Ling's pupils shrank. The blood barbarian tribe specialized in the way of blood, which was cold and strange. They were most afraid of yang forces such as fire and thunder. Therefore, the blood barbarian tribe was most afraid of big tribes such as the fire tribe and the thunder tribe. Rosefinch divine fire, damn it. Only the holy maiden of the fire tribe has it. The saint of Xue Ling's face darkened again. Even if he did not want to believe it, he had to. Yi Guqin's divine fire of the rosefinch divine fire confirmed the fact that he had the rosefinch totem. Boom! The crimson flame poured down like a waterfall. The saint of Xue Ling gritted his teeth. Although he was very afraid of Yi Guqin's divine fire of the rosefinch divine fire, he still had ways to resist it. Blood light shield. The saint of Xue Ling took out a defensive magic weapon. At this moment, Yi Guqin took out a dual-colored flame again. It was the heavenly sun Xianming fire. That is, the unique fire of heaven and earth. The saint of Xue Ling was stunned again when he felt the horrible temperature of the heavenly sun Xianming fire. Not only did he have the divine fire of the rosefinch divine fire, but he also had the unique fire of heaven and earth. However, the saint of Xue Ling's nightmare was not over yet. Streaks of purple thunderbolts gathered on Yi Guqin's body. The unique thunder of heaven and earth. The saint of Xue Ling's expression froze as if he had seen a ghost in broad daylight. He had never seen anyone who could refine the unique fire and unique thunder at the same time. And these two forces could completely suppress him. Just when the saint of Xue Ling's lips were trembling and he was shocked by Yi Guqin's means. A silver thunderbolt burst out of Yi Guqin's body again, shaking the void and giving out thunderous roars. Xian thunder. The saint of Xue Ling took a closer look. Blood rushed to his head and he almost fainted. Chapter 385. The blood barbarian tribe was best restrained by the power of thunder and flame. Because many of the blood barbarian tribe's skills relied on blood and blood poison to exert the greatest effect. Lightning and fire were both extremely effective against the Tao of blood. Therefore, the blood barbarian tribe was very cautious and almost never fought with people who had these two powers. But now, looking at Yi Guqin, who was flying in the air and shooting out exotic fire and unusual thunder, the blood spirit saint's mind went blank. A trace of fear that he had never felt before surged from his heart. The young man in front of him had almost completely defeated him in terms of power attribute. Exotic fire and unusual thunder, and more than one kind. Where did this guy come from? The blood spirit saint's lips were slightly pale, but he was cursing in his heart. The holy sons and holy daughters of other tribes might be able to fight with such people. But as the blood barbarian tribe's holy son, he was most afraid of this kind of people. Unfortunately, he had run into this kind of person. Boom! Yiguchin directly poured down flames and thunderbolts. The blood light shield that the blood spirit saint had taken out immediately sizzled and emitted white smoke. Its surface was full of cracks. Oh no! The blood spirit saint's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly retreated. The next moment, the blood light shield exploded and turned into dust in the flames and thunderbolts. Yiguchin held the blood prison sword and rushed straight down. Seeing this, the blood spirit saint gritted his teeth and formed the blood demon hand on his arm again. Yiguchin's body was surging with flames and thunderbolts. He slashed out with his sword, which contained the power of flames and thunderbolts. The blood spirit saint threw out the blood bone whip, which collided with the blood prison sword. With a harsh sound of collision, the totem power on the blood bone whip was mostly wiped out by the flames and thunderbolts. And the blood prison sword directly cut the bone whip into pieces. Seeing this, the blood spirit saint's eyes turned cold. He flashed forward and slammed the blood demon hand on Yiguchin's chest. Yiguchin's eyes flashed and he immediately used his defensive martial art, All Heaven's Protection. The guardian Vajra's shadow appeared on the surface of Yiguchin's body. The saint of Xue Ling's palm hit on it and made a buzzing sound like a bell. After all, the protection of Luo Tian was only a spirit-level defensive martial skill. To the current Yiguchin, it was not very effective. But it still managed to block the palm of the saint of Xue Ling temporarily. Immediately, Yiguchin punched out with the power of strange fire and strange thunder, colliding with the blood demon hand of the holy son of Xue Ling again. Bang! In this clash, Yiguchin had the complete upper hand. The saint of Xue Ling was at an absolute disadvantage in terms of both power and attribute. Ah! The saint of Xue Ling screamed. His demonic blood hand was broken again. Its bones cracked and shattered. At the same time, the power of Yiguchin's strange fire and strange thunder penetrated the saint of Xue Ling's arm and instantly burned it into charcoal. Don't you have blood medicine to heal your wounds? Come on, let's do it again. Yiguchen's lips curled into a cold smile. He had cut off the saint of Xue Ling's arm, and the saint of Xue Ling had taken the blood medicine to recover. However, Yiguchin knew that such precious blood medicine must be extremely rare even in the blood barbarian tribe. Even the saint of Xue Ling could not have too much of it. Sure enough, after hearing Yiguchin's words, the saint of Xue Ling's face became even more ghastly. He retreated quickly. At the same time, the demonic centipede beside him attacked. The blood hell sword in Yiguchin's hand vibrated and resonated with the void. An extremely terrifying sword wave poured out like a tide. As Yiguchin's understanding of the void sword skill deepened, it would not be long before this spiritual level sword skill was completely comprehended to the martial level. At that time, Yiguchin could officially cultivate the great void sword wave. The demonic centipede had a strong blood armor, but it still could not resist the power of the sword wave. The fierce sword wave directly penetrated the blood armor and shook the demonic centipede into minced meat. Yiguchin took advantage of the situation and slashed at the demonic centipede's mouth with his sword. Flames burst out from the blade. Like a red-hot knife cutting through fat, the centipede demonic beast was cut into two halves from the middle. A ferocious demonic beast comparable to the 8th transformation of the divine soul realm was killed by Yiguchin with one slash. Damn it! The saint of Xue Ling's eyes twitched violently. How could he not know that the young man in front of him was not as simple as an ordinary genius from the 7 superpowers? Who the hell are you? The saint of Xue Ling roared as he retreated quickly. He already had the intention to retreat, with a trace of fear in his eyes. Yiguchin's cold eyes flashed. Since his vermilion bird totem had revealed itself, how could he let the saint of Xue Ling go? Swoosh! The blood sword edge cut through the air, with the violent power of fire and thunder, and slashed at the saint of Xue Ling's head. Thousand-legged blood centipede, totem spirit manifestation. The saint of Xue Ling roared, completely bursting out the totem power. In an instant, a blood centipede phantom, which was much larger than the demonic centipede, rose from the totem. That terrifying blood-red totem power poured out in all directions with a loud bang. Totem spirit manifestation. Yiguchen's eyes were slightly surprised. Regarding totem skills, Yiguchen only knew totem possession. For example, his azure dragon claw, vermilion bird wings, and Wusang's scorpion tail hook, etc. But this was the first time that Yiguchen had seen a totem spirit manifestation. Oh, boy, although you have the ancestral totem, you don't know how to awaken it. It's really a waste for such a totem to fall into your hands. The Saint of Xueling seemed to have gained a little confidence after using this skill. The totem spirit manifestation can only be used after the totem is awakened. Yiguchen suddenly understood. He did not know much about the barbarian tribe, so he did not know the secret. Hiss! In the air, the blood centipede phantom rushed toward Yiguchen. The vigorous totem power spread out, causing the surrounding mountain walls to rumble. At the same time, a blood spiritual shock wave spread toward Yiguchen. My blood centipede totem also has the means of divine soul attack. Boy, go to hell. The Saint of Xueling was ready to attack, waiting for the moment when Yiguchen's sea of consciousness was attacked. As expected, Yiguchen's body suddenly stopped. His face seemed to be pale, as if his sea of consciousness had been shaken. Good chance. The Saint of Xueling held the bone whip, approached Yiguchen, and swung it toward his head. If the whip fell, Yiguchen would be killed in one blow. The Saint of Xueling smiled cruelly, as if he had seen Yiguchen's head explode like a watermelon. But the next moment, the smile on the Saint of Xueling's face froze. Because in an instant, Yiguchen suddenly raised his eyes. His face was clear, and his sea of consciousness was not injured at all. Oh no! The Saint of Xueling's heart suddenly sank. But it was too late. A bright silver spiritual shock wave spread out from Yiguchen's sea of consciousness. It was the star's soul wave released by the meteorite demon's soul butterfly in his sea of consciousness. It's over, Yiguchen stared at the Saint of Xueling coldly. He was like the judge of hell, delivering the verdict of life and death. Chapter 386. No. The Saint of Xueling's eyes were filled with fear. In the past, Blood Spirit Saint could only see such fear in the eyes of others. But now, the roles were reversed. He was the one who showed fear and despair. The star's soul wave released by the meteorite demon's soul butterfly was so powerful that it directly attacked Blood Spirit Saint's sea of consciousness. In an instant, Blood Spirit Saint felt a shock in his head. He had a splitting headache, as if a giant axe was chopping down from the top of his head. He could not even stand steadily, let alone fight back. And because his sea of consciousness was hit, it was difficult for Blood Spirit Saint to control the totem spirit to fight against Yiguchen. Yiguchen raised his hand and released the exotic fire and exotic thunder, which directly drowned Blood Spirit Saint. Blood Explosion Secret Skill. Blood Spirit Saint howled miserably in the midst of the exotic fire and exotic thunder, as if he wanted to make a last stand. Accompanied by a loud explosion, a dense blood-red light also burst out, temporarily pushing the strange fire and lightning to the side. Blood Spirit Saint, who revealed himself, was extremely embarrassed. His bloody clothes were tattered, and his body was scorched black, with smoke rising from it. He looked at Yiguchen with resentment. Then, he formed a seal with both hands and used the blood explosion secret skill to squeeze out his potential. Finally, he condensed a blood-red seal with terrifying fluctuations and rushed toward Yiguchen. Blood Evil Seal. The blood-red seal was like a mountain, bringing a strong sense of oppression. Yiguchen's expression did not change. The thick blood light spread to the blood hell sword. He struck out with the sword, and the shadow of Yama appeared behind him. The fifth move of the god-slaying sword art, Yama. A blood-red sword light, which was dozens of feet long, flew across the sky and directly smashed the blood evil seal. But at the moment when the seal was smashed, a little blood light directly entered Yiguchen's body with lightning speed. Yiguchen frowned and checked his body. The blood barbarian tribe had always used strange means. Yiguchen did not want to be fooled by any tricks. The little blood light had no lethality or attack, but it condensed a blood talisman in Yiguchen's body. What is this? Yiguchen's tone was slightly cold. On the other side, after using the blood explosion secret skill, Blood Saint's state fell to the bottom. His entire body was charred black. His skin and flesh were torn apart by the strange fire and thunder. However, when he looked at Yiguchen, there was a sneer of vengeance. This is the killing talisman of our blood barbarian tribe. As long as you are hit by this talisman, within a month, any blood barbarian tribe member can use a special secret method to track you. So, you will definitely die. Blood Spirit Holy Sun sneered and coughed up blood again. Oh, I see. Yiguchen's eyes were indifferent. In other words, the sure-kill talisman would remain in Yiguchen's body for a month. During this month, any blood barbarian who wanted to could track down Yiguchen and treat him as prey. Of course, if you're willing to let me go, I'll remove the sure-kill talisman. What do you think? This is good for both of us. The Saint of Xueling did not want to die either. He was the saint of a clan. How could he be willing to die in the hands of an unknown young man? So you're threatening me? That's fine. Yiguchen nodded slightly. The Saint of Xueling smiled and heaved a sigh of relief. Humph, this boy is still too young. After you let me go, I will not lift the killing talisman. When I return to my family, I will gather a group of masters to kill you. Then, I will make you suffer. The holy son of Xueling was extremely resentful. As the holy son of a clan, when had he ever suffered such a loss? In addition, the Saint of Xueling was insidious and vengeful. It was impossible for him to let Yiguchen go. Yiguchen slowly raised his hand and a sharp sword chi gathered in his palm. Seeing Yiguchen's action, the Saint of Xueling's eyelids suddenly twitched. He had an ominous feeling. What are you going to do? Didn't we agree? I'm sorry. The blood barbarian tribe is not enough to make me afraid. Moreover, even if all the barbarian tribes worked together, they would not be able to threaten me. Because I, Yiguchen, have never been one to be threatened. Yiguchen's tone was as cold as the cold wind. As he raised his hand, a beautiful and terrifying golden sword chi lotus flower with destructive power formed above his palm. Hearing this, the Saint of Xueling's heart suddenly sank. But in an instant, the Saint of Xueling seemed to think of something. His eyes widened and a sense of horror crept up his face. What did you say your name was? Yiguchen. The Saint of Xueling's voice trembled and he could not hide his horror. Yiguchen, the sword master, was so famous that even the barbarian tribe had heard of him. It was rumored that because of Yiguchen's death, the holy sons and holy daughters had one less enemy. But now, the young man in front of him claimed to be the sword master. This made the Saint of Xueling's heart suddenly tighten. And he felt that the strength shown by the young man in front of him did not seem to be fake. Aren't you dead? How could it be? The Saint of Xueling wailed in his heart. He had wanted to capture Xiao Wanru just to satisfy his desire, but he had run into this devil. Yiguchen looked at the Saint of Xueling with cold eyes. I have said that among the holy sons of the barbarian tribe, I will start with you. After saying this, Yiguchen flicked his finger and threw out the golden sword lotus. No. I am the holy son of the blood barbarian tribe. How can I die here? The Saint of Xueling retreated quickly and tried to escape. However, he was already at the end of his rope. How could he escape this sure-kill attack? The golden sword lotus exploded on the Saint of Xueling. A majestic golden lotus enveloped the Saint of Xueling. As the lotus petals rotated, the Saint of Xueling's body was cut by countless sword chi. It was as if he was being dismembered. Ah! a shrill scream came to an abrupt end. A holy son had died. Looking at the ground full of minced flesh and blood, Yiguchin had a direct understanding of the power of the reincarnation sword lotus. Not only was it powerful, but it was also extremely painful as the petals of the sword qi rotated. The poor saint of Xueling was used as a touchstone by Yiguchin to test the power of the reincarnation sword lotus. At this moment, Yiguchin suddenly found something in the pool of minced flesh and blood. Yiguchin went forward and picked it up. It was a token that looked like blood jade. The word, holy, was engraved on the front. Is this the Holy Sun token? Yiguchin thought. In the barbarian tribe, the holy sons and holy daughters had their own tokens. They always carried them with them and would not fall into the hands of others. The higher-ups of the 7 superpowers also judged the merits of killing according to the Holy Sun token and Holy Daughter token. Yiguchin casually put the Holy Sun token into his vital ring. After killing a Holy Sun, Yiguchin's expression did not change at all. It was as if killing a Holy Sun was not a big deal. Yiguchin also knew the reason why he could kill Xueling so easily. It was because his exotic fire and thunder were the natural nemesis of the blood barbarian tribe. If it were another holy son of the barbarian tribe, Yiguchin might not have been able to deal with him so easily. Therefore, it was not that the holy son of the barbarian tribe was weak, but that holy son Xueling was too unlucky to have met Yiguchin, who was his natural nemesis. Although I have killed Xueling, the must-kill token is a little troublesome. But it will only last for a month. Yiguchin thought to himself. The must-kill token was just a little troublesome for Yiguchin, but it was not a big threat. After adjusting his breath for a while, Yiguchin chased after Xiao Lai and the others. After Yiguchin killed Xueling, there was a disturbance in the blood barbarian tribe. Chapter 387. The blood barbarian tribe was located in a place called the Heaven Blood Demon Castle. Inside the castle, there was a hall that emitted a gloomy aura. An old man in a blood-red robe was looking at a blood-red stone platform in front of him solemnly. There were many blood-red jade tokens on the platform. As for one of the fragments, it had already shattered. Xueling is dead, the old man said emotionlessly. Behind him, an elder of the blood barbarian tribe stepped forward and bowed. He asked, High Priest, do we need to send experts to kill Xueling's murderer? That person is now not far from northern Liang City. Currently, the 7 great factions of the empire have all gathered in northern Liang City. There are as many experts as there are clouds. If you are discovered by the experts in the city, let alone all of you, even I will not be able to return. High Priest Xue Wuye coldly said. What should we do? How can we let go of the person who killed our holy son? The elder was unwilling to give up. Don't worry. Xueling won't provoke strong cultivators easily. The one who killed him must be a genius of the 7 great forces. He'll have to fight one day. When the time comes, ask the holy sons and holy daughters of the blood barbarian tribe to kill him together. He won't be able to escape, said the high priest coldly. Yes. The elder bowed. He knew that Xueling's strength was at most average among the holy sons and holy daughters of the blood barbarian tribe. There were several holy sons and holy daughters who were stronger than him. Therefore, they thought that the genius who killed Xueling could not be that strong. He would not be able to escape the pursuit of the other holy sons and holy daughters. An order came from the sacrificial hall of the Heaven Blood Demon Castle. All the holy sons and holy daughters of the blood barbarian tribe received the order from the high priest Xue Yuli. A siege against Yiguchin was about to begin. In a city, a sexy blood barbarian woman in revealing clothes suddenly sensed something and took out a jade slip. All the holy princes and holy maidens of the blood barbarian tribe should surround and kill one person. Why would the high priest give such an order? Apart from Xian Hao, the young war emperor and a few others, who else is qualified for us to surround and kill? This woman was one of the holy maidens of the blood barbarian tribe, Xue Chan. There was a trace of disdain on her face as she felt that the high priestess was making a mountain out of a molehill. At the same time, several other saints and saintesses also received orders to keep an eye on Yiguchin's movements. If there was a chance, they were to kill him. Of course, they were the same as the blood cicada. They looked down on this order and felt that it was unnecessary. In a wasteland, corpses littered the ground. It was an incomparably bloody scene. A youth with a scar on his face rode on a huge blood-colored demonic wolf. He had a pensive look in his eyes. It's just the death of Xue Ling. Is there a need to make such a big fuss? With Xue Ling's strength, the person who killed him is probably just an ordinary genius. Why use a butcher's knife to kill a chicken? The high priest is a little muddle-headed. The scarred young man shook his head slightly and sneered. In the barbarian tribe, the high priest's status was extremely high. No one dared to speak rudely to him. However, this youth spoke casually and did not care. This was because he was the most powerful holy son and saintess of the blood barbarian tribe, holy son Xue Wuchang. Of course, whether it was Xue Wuchang or blood cicada, they did not know that the person who killed Xue Ling was not an ordinary genius, but Yiguchin from the sword sect. They also did not know that Yiguchin possessed the exotic fire and unusual thunder that could naturally suppress the blood barbarian tribe. Therefore, it was hard to say who was the hunter and who was the prey in this siege. On the other side, Xiao Lai and the others, who had escaped from the natural moat gorge, were riding on the Fergana horses and rushing through the Gobi Desert. They did not dare to stop at all, for they were afraid that Xue Ling would catch up with them after killing Yiguchin. "Husband, how much longer until we reach northern Yang City?" Madame Xiao, who was riding on the horse, shouted with a pale face and a trembling voice. The injury on her shoulder had only been treated briefly and she had taken some elixirs, but it was still very painful. "Madam, hold on a little longer," Xiao Lai said with a trace of guilt in his heart. He felt very guilty towards Yiguchin. If we had listened to him, we might have been able to go around the natural moat gorge. It's all our fault for wanting to reach northern Yang City as soon as possible. That's why we didn't listen to him. Now, he has to cover our retreat. Xiao Lai shook his head and sighed deeply. He was a person who valued friendship. At this moment, he thought that Yiguchin might have met with a mishap and felt very guilty. "Husband, don't feel guilty anymore. We were kind enough to bring him along. Now is the time for him to repay our kindness. There's no need to blame yourself," Madame Xiao said matter-of-factly. It was as if they had done Yiguchin a great favor by bringing Yiguchin along. Yiguchin had killed the totem warriors and healed Xiao Lai's injuries. Now, he had even let them escape and covered their retreat. Madame Xiao directly ignored these favors. "Mother, you are too unreasonable." Xiao Wanru also felt that Madame Zhao's words were extremely harsh. She had been feeling down. Now that she heard Madame Zhao's sharp words, she felt indignant for Yiguchin. "Wanru, you don't understand. Do you know why this young man is helping us? He wants to please us, please you, the young madam of the Shinta clan. He is doing this to hug the Shinta clan's thighs. It's all for himself." Madame Xiao tried to figure out Yiguchin's thoughts with her snobbish way of thinking. "Enough!" Xiao Lai shouted and raised his tiger-like eyebrows. "Am I wrong? Isn't that the case?" Madame Xiao snorted coldly. However, at this moment, a faint voice suddenly came from behind them. "To please the Shinta clan. Is the Shinta clan worthy?" A figure dressed in black and wearing a bamboo hat lightly flew over from behind. "Little brother. Young Master Yi." When they saw who it was, Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru were shocked. They were stunned for a moment and could not recover from their shock. "Ghost!" Madame Xiao was even more horrified. She thought that she had seen Yiguchin's ghost. It was no wonder that they were so surprised. They could not believe that Yiguchin, who had faced the holy son of Xue Ling and a group of totem warriors alone, could return safely. Xiao Lai had guessed that Yi Guqin should be a genius disciple of some aristocratic family. Therefore, when Yi Guqin said that he had killed Wu Sang and the other totem warriors, Xiao Lai could still believe it. However, now that he was surrounded by a holy sun and a group of totem warriors, he was still safe and sound. This was beyond Xiao Lai's expectations. "Young master, you are really all right." Although Xiao Wanru was shocked, she was more happy. That group of blood barbarians. Xiao Lai wanted to say something but stopped. He looked at Yi Guqin. Yi Guqin did not speak. He nodded lightly. Hiss, Xiao Lai took a deep breath and suppressed the shock in his heart. A holy son had died just like that. He had died at the hands of this unknown young man in front of him. Even Xiao Lai was curious about Yi Guqin's identity. On the other hand, Madame Xiao, who had calmed down, looked at Yi Guqin with uncertainty. She had previously slandered Yi Guqin, saying that he had abandoned the Xiao family guards and escaped alone. This time, Yi Guqin was alone. The fact that he was safe and sound was enough to prove that Yi Guqin was telling the truth. However, this fact was like a loud slap to Madame Xiao's face. She looked a little embarrassed. Xiao Lai and Xiao Wanru's resentful gazes made Madame Xiao's cheeks burn. However, no matter how self-righteous Madame Xiao was, she knew that the young man in front of her was not an ordinary person. Thinking of this, Madame Xiao forced a smile on her snow-white cheeks. She said, "You did well this time. You did have some credit." Yi Guqin glanced at Madame Xiao coldly. Although Madame Xiao was smiling, her tone was like a superior praising a subordinate. "I believe that your cultivation is not weak. Since you saved us this time, I have decided to let you enter the Shinto family in the future. At the very least, you can become young Master Shinto and Wanru's personal guard." Madame Xiao raised her chin slightly. She thought that she had given Yi Guqin a great benefit and grace. Chapter 388. Become the Shinto family's guard. Yi Guqin was not angry at all when he heard Madame Xiao's words. Instead, he wanted to laugh. Yi Guqin was the sword master of the Saint Origin dynasty. On top of that, he was one of the 7 major forces, the sword master ranked first in the inner courtyard of the Forest of Pagodas. Who in the entire Saint Origin dynasty was qualified to make Yi Guqin a guard? Even if Yi Guqin stood in front of Shinto Miao and said he wanted to be his guard, Shinto Miao would not dare. Would Shinto Miao dare to make Yi Guqin a guard? Shinto Miao had attacked Yi Guqin several times in the past. However, as Yi Guqin's cultivation increased, the gap between him and Shinto Miao's strength gradually widened. Shinto Miao would not be able to eat or sleep well if he made Yi Guqin a guard. Yi Guqin could not help but laugh when he thought of this. A breeze blew past and lifted the black veil. Madame Xiao happened to see his smile. With a faint smile on her face, she said with a faint sense of pride, "I know you are very happy. After all, not everyone has the qualifications to enter a super family like the Shinto family, much less become young Master Shinto and Wanru's bodyguard. This is my reward for your escort this time." "Madam, let's forget it." Xiao Lai sighed. He vaguely sensed that Yi Guqin's background seemed to be greater than he had guessed. Why forget it? Isn't this what this little brother is after? I am doing him a favor. Madame Xiao had a superior look on her face. Even Xiao Wanru, who was at the side, was somewhat puzzled. This was because she had seen Yi Guqin's faint smile just now. Could it be that young Master Yi really wants to join the Shinto family? Xiao Wanru could not help but feel empty when she thought of this. She was disappointed in Yi Guqin again. Are you satisfied now? Madame Xiao lifted her chin slightly and looked at Yi Guqin. Frogs in the well cannot talk about the sea, summer insects cannot talk about the ice. Yi Guqin shook his head slightly, his tone indifferent. Yi Guqin had nothing to say to a snobbish person like Madame Xiao. Big brother Xiao, let's head straight to northern Liang City, Yi Guqin said to Xiao Lai indifferently. Oh, okay, Okay. Xiao Lai naturally did not dare to neglect Yi Guqin and hurriedly nodded his head. Kid, don't regret it. When the time comes, even if you beg me, I will not let you join the Shinto family. Madame Xiao, who had been ignored, coldly snorted with an ashen face. Yi Guqin and the others headed towards northern Liang City. Along the way, Madame Xiao tirelessly told Xiao Wanru about Yi Guqin's various faults. Things like not knowing how to be grateful, being obstinate and self-opinionated, etc. Xiao Wanru had previously wondered if Yi Guqin really had some ulterior motive for helping them like Madame Xiao had said. Wanru, let mother tell you, when we reach northern Liang City, that kid will definitely beg mother to let him join the Shinto family. Do you still have any feelings for such a person who cares so much about face? Madame Xiao had previously sensed that Xiao Wanru seemed to have some special feelings for Yi Guqin. Therefore, she tried her best to smear Yi Guqin so that Xiao Wanru could marry Shinto Miao with peace of mind. Is that so? Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes were confused. After that, she also sighed and recalled the slanderous words Yi Guqin had said about the sword sect. Perhaps, it is really as mother said. He is a headstrong and self-opinionated person. Xiao Wanru could not help but feel a little disappointed when she thought of this. She no longer paid attention to Yi Guqin and cut off the thoughts in her heart. Seeing this, Madame Zhao's eyes carried a trace of joy. On the other hand, Yi Guqin felt that Xiao Wanru's attitude towards him had become a little cold. However, Yi Guqin did not care. He did not have any feelings for Xiao Wanru in the first place. Now, Yi Guqin was concerned about the exchange between the 7 major factions in northern Liang City. One could imagine how exciting the competition would be when the top geniuses of the 7 major factions gathered together. Yi Guqin also had a trace of anticipation. Just as Yi Guqin and the rest were rushing towards northern Liang City, the city was extremely lively. Northern Liang City was an important city in the Great Desolate Mansion. It was also the base of the Shinto family. It was a magnificent city that occupied a large area. Now, there were 2 major events that were about to take place in northern Liang City. The first event was the marriage of the Shinto family's genius, Shinto Miao, and the pearl of the Gongsun family, Gongsun Xiaoye. The Gongsun family was also a super family in the Great Desolate Mansion. They specialized in forging weapons and had a strong foundation. This event was supposed to be a grand occasion for the entire northern Liang City. However, because of another matter, the exchange between the 7 major factions had begun. Therefore, the wedding banquet of the Shinto family was postponed. After all, the Shinto family was only a super family. It was far from being comparable to the 7 major factions. In 7 days, the people from the 7 major factions had all arrived in northern Liang City. The exchange meeting was held immediately. The exchange did not last for just 1 or 2 days. It lasted for 5 days. As for the competition between the top geniuses, it was placed on the last 2 days. This was because it was the most important competition that would determine the division of the various factions. Northern Liang City, House Yunyan. House Yunyan was the most luxurious and high-end restaurant in northern Liang City. Recently, many people from the 7 major factions had gathered here for an exchange. At this moment, on the highest level of House Yunyan, 2 ladies were sitting by the window. One of them was dressed in pink. She was extremely beautiful, but her face was slightly haggard and had a trace of paleness. The other lady was dressed in white and had black hair. Her eyebrows were picturesque and her skin was as white as snow. She had a classical beauty to her. They were the 2 geniuses of the Consonance Palace, Zither Fairy and LV Qinghan. Senior sister, why did you ask me to come here? Zither Fairy was puzzled. Looking at Zither Fairy's haggard face, LV Qinghan sighed and said, in another 2 or 3 days, the exchange between the geniuses of the 7 major factions will take place. Senior sister brought you here to relax. Isn't that good? Thank you, senior sister. Although Zither Fairy was not interested, she could not refuse. At this moment, a handsome young man dressed in white walked up the stairs. This young man dressed in white had a handsome face. He had a smile on his face. A beautiful jade hung from his waist and he held a folding fan in his hand. He was a rare handsome young man. With the arrival of this young man, almost everyone at the other tables on the top floor looked at him. It's little spiritual emperor Zhou Tong from the 3 imperial palaces. As expected of his name. Not only is he handsome, but his cultivation and strength are also extraordinary. Yes, his strength is second only to the young war emperor among the younger generation of the 3 imperial palaces. It seems like he is here to meet a beauty. Many people whispered as their gazes fell on Zhou Tong. Then, they turned to look at LV Qinghan and Zither Fairy. In the surrounding crowd, only a young man dressed in black did not pay any attention to Zhou Tong. He sat alone at a table by the window and slowly sipped the wine in his cup. Chapter 389. When Zhou Tong arrived, he immediately saw the beauty he had been thinking about day and night. The Zither Fairy's face was beautiful and graceful. Zhou Tong had seen her once before and it was hard for him to forget. In addition, Zither Fairy specialized in Zither Dao. She had developed an elegant temperament that was very attractive. Lu Qinghan on the side did not lose to the Zither Fairy in terms of looks and temperament. But first of all, Lu Qinghan's identity and capabilities were slightly higher than Zhou Tong's. Second of all, Lu Qinghan was the perfect partner for the Little War Emperor. Zhou Tong did not have the guts to fight with the Little War Emperor for a beauty. Luckily, other than the fact that the Zither Fairy's cultivation was slightly weaker, she did not lose to Lu Qinghan in everything else. Therefore, Zhou Tong also liked her and pursued her. Senior sister Lu, Zither Fairy, how have you been? Zhou Tong's relationship with Lu Qinghan was not bad, so he called her senior sister. Zhou Tong, long time no see. Your cultivation has improved a lot. Lu Qinghan softly smiled. Sorry, senior sister. I am a bit tired and will be resting at my place. The Zither Fairy's expression was calm as she stood up to leave. Junior sister, wait. Zhou Tong kindly invited us to a gathering. It's not good for you to reject him like this. Lu Qinghan placed her hand on the Zither Fairy's shoulder and softly smiled. Junior sister, if you are tired, this show has a top-grade spirit cleansing pill here. Perhaps it can alleviate your fatigue. Zhou Tong saw the opportunity and handed over a jade bottle. Seeing Zhou Tong casually give away a top-grade treasure pill, the surrounding crowd was secretly surprised. A supreme Dan was extraordinarily valuable. Only a heaven's favorite from the 7 controlling forces could give out a Dan without frowning. Ah, Zhou Tong, it seems like you really care about my junior sister. You are giving her a supreme Dan so casually. Lu Qinghan smiled. Zhou Tong had contacted Lu Qinghan earlier and wanted her to be his matchmaker. Lu Qinghan was happy to fulfill his wish. Therefore, she did not hold back in complimenting Zhou Tong. However, the Zither Fairy's expression did not change at all. Back then, when Yiguchen acquired the bronze cauldron, he gave her many supreme dawn. In contrast, when Zhou Tong gave out this one, it was as if he had given out a heavenly gift. This made Zither Fairy even more dispirited. Zhou Tong and Yiguchen couldn't be compared at all. Thank you for your kindness, Mr. Zhou, but Zither Fairy does not need this item. Zither Fairy declined politely, not wanting to accept Zhou Tong's treasured pill. Junior sister, Zhou Tong has good intentions towards you. LV Qinghan said with a slight frown. Junior sister, are you embarrassed? There's no need to be polite with this show. Zhou Tong still had a calm smile on his face. Helpless, the Zither Fairy waved her hand and a large number of jade bottles were placed on the table. As the stoppers were opened, an extremely thick pill fragrance immediately filled the entire top floor of the House of Smoke. These are all supreme-grade elixirs. Some of the geniuses from the surrounding forces were stunned. Even the core disciples of the 7 major forces would not be able to possess so many supreme-grade elixirs. Junior sister, this is... LV Qinghan's jade-like face froze slightly. These were all given to me by Mr. Yiguchen. That's why I said I don't need your elixirs. Zither Fairy's tone was calm, but when she mentioned Yiguchen, there was a slight change in her expression. There was a slight sense of loss and sadness. Zhou Tong's face was slightly stiff. He looked at Zither Fairy's supreme-grade elixirs, and then looked at his own shabby bottle of elixirs. Even Zhou Tong felt a little embarrassed, and directly put away the elixirs without batting an eyelid. He saw that Zither Fairy's face was filled with sadness as if she was thinking of someone, but there was a hint of gloominess in his heart. It's Yiguchen again. Zhou Tong's expression didn't change, but his heart was cold. He and Ji Yan were both the 3rd young emperor of the 3 imperial palaces, and their relationship was not bad. Ji Yan was killed by Yiguchen in the Void Sword Realm, and naturally, Zhou Tong didn't have a good impression of Yiguchen. However, Yiguchen's death was later announced, and Zhou Tong couldn't be jealous of a dead person, so he didn't care too much. But now, the beauty he thought of day and night was hiding another person in her heart. And it was a dead person. How could Zhou Tong accept this, and how could he not be angry? However, due to his deep thoughts and disguise, Zhou Tong did not give himself away. On the surface, he still maintained a refined and courteous appearance. Junior apprentice sister, I saw that you've been working so hard every day that you're completely worn out. That's why I set up this banquet in House Yunyan so that you could relax. Sigh, I didn't think that I would make junior apprentice sister even more upset. Zhou Tong sighed slightly, and directly picked up a cup of wine, slightly bowed to Zither Fairy, and then drank it in one gulp. Even Zither Fairy was a little surprised by this scene. She thought that Zhou Tong would be angry and ashamed. But she didn't expect him to be so polite. Even the people around who were paying attention were secretly amazed. There's nothing to say about Zhou Tong's temperament. As one of the 3 little kings, what woman can't he get? He's actually so respectful to a woman. Yes, young Master Zhou Tong's temperament is really unmatched. Hearing the praises around him, Zhou Tong's expression was still indifferent. No one could see through his schemes and disguise. Junior sister, look, Zhou Tong is treating you so politely. Don't be so unreasonable. Seeing that Zither Fairy's attitude seemed to have softened, LV Qinghan continued to persuade her. She believed in Zhou Tong's character, and was willing to play matchmaker between Zhou Tong and Zither Fairy. Zither Fairy was helpless, and could only drink a cup of wine. Seeing this, Zhou Tong's eyes lit up, and he directly sat beside Zither Fairy. Zither Fairy directly moved her body, and moved closer to LV Qinghan. Zhou Tong didn't mind seeing this. He believed that as long as there was a slight opening, he could completely take Zither Fairy down. I actually know that junior sister's heart belongs to someone. After all, who wouldn't admire someone like the Sword Master? Zhou Tong praised. LV Qinghan was a little surprised. One had to know that Yiguchen had killed Ji Yan, and he was also the object of Zither Fairy's affection. She didn't expect that Zhou Tong not only did not slander him, but instead praised him. But hearing Zhou Tong praise Yiguchen, Zither Fairy's expression also eased. Zhou Tong glanced at her, and his heart became even colder, but on the surface, there was a smile. To be honest, it is my life's regret that I didn't see the Sword Master's demeanor with my own eyes. If he was still alive, I would really like to exchange pointers with him. What a pity, the heavens are jealous of heroes. Such a person actually fell in the Void Sword Realm. Zhou Tong sighed, as if the one who died was his own brother. Hearing this, Zither Fairy's eyes turned slightly red, and she felt a sharp pain in her heart. Junior sister, you have to be more open-minded. The dead can't be revived. If the Sword Master was still alive, he wouldn't want to see you so sad. Zhou Tong's words were gentle and carried concern. If it was any other woman, they would probably be intoxicated by Zhou Tong's gentleness. But in Zither Fairy's heart, there was only an even more bone-piercing sadness. Junior sister, people have to look forward. You can't live in the past. Zhou Tong treats you so sincerely, can you still turn a blind eye? LV Qinghan continued to persuade. No. Zither Fairy can't forget Lord Yi, and I don't want to forget. Zither Fairy shook her head, bit her red lips, and said in a sorrowful tone. Junior sister, I also don't want you to linger in the past. The sword master can't become a shadow in your heart. Zhou Tong's words seemed gentle, but they were pressing. No, how can Lord Yi be a shadow in my heart? Zither Fairy's face became even paler. Junior sister, you're already possessed. What's the point of continuing to think about the dead? LV Qinghan also continued to emphasize her tone. She just didn't understand. No matter how outstanding Yi Guqin was, he was still a dead person. Why was Zither Fairy so obsessed with a dead person? Zither Fairy was a little desperate, and her emotions were about to collapse. She covered her face and wept. And just when Zhou Tong and LV Qinghan wanted to continue speaking, suddenly, a chopstick, with lightning speed, flew directly towards Zhou Tong. Who? Zhou Tong's reaction was also extremely fast. He unfolded the folding fan in his hand, wanting to send the chopstick flying. But that chopstick actually contained a trace of fierce true energy, and with a bang, it directly exploded. Zhou Tong let out a muffled groan, and actually took several steps back. His eyes were filled with astonishment as he stared fixedly in that direction. Everyone here, including LV Qinghan, was stunned by this sudden scene. One of the three little emperors, Zhou Tong, was actually beaten back. And it was also at this moment that a voice sounded. Although I don't like Yi Guqin, he isn't someone you can casually criticize. The black-clothed youth sitting alone by the window drinking wine said coldly. Chapter 390. Everyone's hearts were filled with shock. Zhou Tong was a disciple personally taught by a divine palace expert from the three palaces. It could be said that Zhou Tong was ranked at the top of the younger generation in the Saint Origin dynasty. He wasn't someone that anyone could provoke. But now, the black-clothed youth drinking wine by the window casually used a chopstick to push Zhou Tong back a few steps. This level of cultivation and strength caused everyone to be somewhat stunned. Zhou Tong's face turned solemn as he stared at the black-clothed youth. The youth's facial features were cold, his lips thin, and his face indifferent. May I ask which sect you're from? Zhou Tong's thoughts were deep and he didn't show any obvious anger. Instead, he greeted him with respect and cupped his fists. He looked at the black-clothed youth and searched his mind for the young heaven prides of the 7 major forces. But there wasn't a single heaven pride that matched the black-clothed youth's appearance. Is this person not from the 7 major forces? Zhou Tong frowned slightly. I'm just a nobody. I just can't stand you guys forcing this girl and your casual evaluation of the Dead Sword sect. The black-clothed youth's tone was cold. Young master, we're not forcing you, but stating a fact. But if you attack Zhou Tong again, Qinghan won't just stand by and watch. LV Qinghan stepped forward, her delicate body faintly emitting an oppressive aura. As a top heaven pride of the Consonance Palace, she was stronger than Zhou Tong. Senior sister, forget it. Zither Fairy said in a low voice. Ha, senior sister, you don't have to be like this. If you're interested, why don't we have a drink together? I'll treat you, and it's naturally better if we can become friends. Zhou Tong smiled, his tone was very warm. Seeing Zhou Tong's attitude, the surrounding people secretly nodded in admiration. He was suddenly targeted, but he didn't get angry and instead invited with respect. Not everyone had this kind of magnanimity. But they didn't see the trace of haze in Zhou Tong's eyes. I'll make a conclusion after I find out your background. If you have a strong background, it's naturally best to form a good relationship with you. If you don't, then Zhou Tong's heart was cold. Sorry, I'm not interested in making friends with hypocrites. My interest in drinking has been ruined by you. The black-clothed youth put down the cup in his hand and turned to leave. Zhou Tong's face sank slightly. LV Qinghan, on the other hand, frowned and said in a slightly cold tone, "You suddenly attacked and slandered me like this. Do you want to leave at will now?" After LV Qinghan finished speaking, her lotus steps flashed as she directly rushed towards the black-clothed youth. After which, her jade-like palm struck out. A powerful surge of Jinqi condensed in the center of his palm. Then, it gushed out, as if it had turned into plum blossoms. It's the Consonance Palace's top-grade spirit martial art, Falling Plum Palm. There was no lack of geniuses from the 7 major forces around, and they immediately recognized LV Qinghan's move. With her Divine Soul 9 transformations cultivation, the might of a top-grade spirit-level martial art was absolutely not something that anyone could withstand. However, in the face of LV Qinghan's extreme move, the black-clothed youth's gaze remained indifferent. He only stretched out his palm and did not use any martial arts. Vigorous and violent true qi surged and collided with LV Qinghan's jade palm. Bang! His true qi burst out, and the surrounding tables were overturned. The black-clothed youth did not take a single step back, but LV Qinghan took 3 steps back. Zhou Tong's eyes suddenly narrowed, and the onlookers were also shocked. The black-clothed youth who had mysteriously appeared had actually pushed LV Qinghan back with a single palm. LV Qinghan was one of the top geniuses, and it was difficult to find a match for her in the younger generation of the Saint Origin dynasty. Who are you? LV Qinghan frowned, and ripples were set off in her heart. Are the geniuses of the Saint Origin dynasty all frogs at the bottom of a well? With such cultivation, how dare you judge others? Even if the sword master is dead, what right do you have to judge others? The black-clothed youth's tone was indifferent and cold. Even a cold and indifferent fairy like LV Qinghan could not help but reveal a trace of embarrassment when she heard this. However, they understood the meaning of the youth's words. So you're not from the Saint Origin dynasty? Zhou Tong's tone was a little solemn. If it was such a person, it would not be good for him to offend. I wonder if this young master is related to young Master Yi. Zither Fairy stepped forward. The black-clothed youth in front of her was so protective of Yi Guqin's reputation, causing Zither Fairy to reveal a trace of hope. Perhaps Yi Guqin was not dead, and was hiding somewhere. The black-clothed youth ignored Zhou Tong, and glanced at Zither Fairy, and said indifferently, "It has nothing to do with him." After the youth finished speaking, he casually threw a crystal jade as payment for the wine. True qi surged behind his back, and a pair of pitch-black eagle wings spread out. He directly flew out of the window on the top floor. Hidden gate of life and death. Seeing the youth fly out, many people in the surroundings burst out in shock. However, LV Qinghan and Zhou Tong knew that it should be some kind of secret flying technique. Senior sister, young Master Zhou, I'll go back and rest first. Zither Fairy said in a low voice and was about to leave. After such a thing happened, Zhou Tong and LV Qinghan lost their interest. However, Zhou Tong still smiled faintly and said, although this gathering was disturbed by outsiders, it doesn't matter. When I get into the top 3 in the exchange, I'll invite junior sister and senior sister LV to have a gathering together. Zhou Tong said as he gracefully waved his folding fan. When the time comes, I'll definitely bring junior sister. LV Qinghan nodded slightly. However, in her heart, she was still upset about being defeated by the black-clothed youth. Looking at LV Qinghan and Zither Fairy's departing figures, the smile on Zhou Tong's face slowly disappeared. How annoying. However, I'll completely reveal my strength at the exchange and get into the top 3. At that time, Zither Fairy will know how stupid it is to yearn for a dead person day and night. Zhou Tong's eyes reflected a cold light. At the exchange, there were also people like Xian Hao and demonic blade Ling Ju, so Zhou Tong did not dare to say that he could get first place. However, as long as he could get into the top 3, he would be satisfied. Zhou Tong pondered in his heart, and also left House Yunyan. Outside House Yunyan, in the sky above northern Yang City, the black-clothed youth's face was like ice, unchanging for eternity. Yi Guqin, it seems that you're really dead. This black-clothed youth was none other than Su Moyan, who came from Lotus Village. Although he had already received news of Yi Guqin's death, Su Moyan still wanted to confirm it first. That was why he came to northern Yang City, where the 7 major forces gathered. If Yi Guqin was still alive, then he would definitely follow the Sword Sect's tower to northern Yang City. However, what disappointed Su Moyan was that after staying in northern Yang City for a few days, he did not find any news about Yi Guqin. Even in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, no one talked about Yi Guqin. Thus, Su Moyan confirmed that Yi Guqin was really dead. Yi Guqin, you've really disappointed junior sister. However, the only one who can save junior sister is me. Su Moyan looked into the distance and directly flew out of northern Yang City. A day after Su Moyan left northern Yang City. At the city gate of northern Yang City, there were 4 travel-worn figures. They were Yi Guqin, Xiao Lai, and the others. Chapter 391. After leaving the heavenly Moat Gorge, they traveled for another 2 days. Yi Guqin and company finally arrived at northern Yang City. Looking at the majestic city in front of her, Madame Xiao dismounted from her horse and collapsed on the ground. She was so emotional that she cried happily. We've finally arrived at northern Yang City. Our bitter days are finally over. Madame Xiao cried tears of joy. Xiao Wanru and Xiao Lai were also emotional. Little brother, I can't thank you enough for saving my life. If you need anything in the future, Xiao Lai, am willing to do anything for you. Xiao Lai solemnly cupped his hands and thanked Yi Guqin. Wanru also thanks young master for escorting us. Xiao Wanru bowed towards Yi Guqin. Although Xiao Wanru had become much colder towards Yi Guqin due to Madame Zhao's guidance. However, she still felt grateful in her heart. It's alright, it was convenient. Yi Guqin waved his hand and did not ask for anything in return. Madame Xiao, who was standing at the side, glanced at Yi Guqin after she had calmed down. A faint smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Young man, if you want favors, just say it. Why do you have to beat around the bush and pretend to be indifferent? To be honest, being able to introduce you to the Shintu family and becoming their guard is already very good. What else do you want? Madame Xiao put her hands on her hips and shook her head as she sighed. She seemed to think that Yi Guqin was rejecting her because he was greedy and wanted more. Madam, you. Xiao Lai sighed deeply and felt very helpless. Mother, since young master is not willing to join the Shintu family, then forget it. Xiao Wanru spoke at the right time. Yi Guqin ignored Madame Xiao and looked at Xiao Wanru instead. He thought of that night when they were by the bonfire. The girl's eyes were filled with longing and disappointment. Marrying someone you don't like is indeed a kind of cruelty. Yi Guqin hesitated for a moment before taking out a jade scroll and handing it to Xiao Wanru. This is... Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes were filled with doubt. If there's something you can't solve, crush the jade slip. Perhaps I can help you once. Yi Guqin's tone was indifferent. As soon as he finished speaking, Madame Xiao could not help but laugh. Brat, who do you think you are? Although your strength is not bad, my Wanru will have a noble status in the future. Why would she need your help? Madame Xiao felt that Yi Guqin's behavior was laughable. He was overestimating himself. Yi Guqin ignored Madame Xiao and just looked at Xiao Wanru indifferently. Xiao Wanru held the jade slip in her hand with a complicated expression. Looking at Xiao Wanru's absent-minded appearance, Madame Xiao frowned. He could not let Xiao Wanru meet Shintu Miao in this state. Wanru, quickly throw this jade slip away. Madame Xiao ordered. Well. Xiao Wanru bit her red lips and was at a loss for a moment. Madam, you've gone too far. Xiao Lai said with a frown. Madam Xiao actually said this in front of Yi Guqin. Wasn't this embarrassing for Yi Guqin? What do you mean? I'm thinking for Wanru. As Shintu Miao's wife, how can she keep another man's keepsake? Wanru, listen to me and throw this jade slip away, Madam Xiao scolded. Xiao Wanru was at a loss. She recalled Yi Guqin's slander of the sword sect that night, coupled with Madame Zhao's subtle influence. In the end, Xiao Wanru gritted her teeth slightly and looked at Yi Guqin. She said apologetically, I'm sorry, young Master Yi. Thank you for your help along the way. But as expected, we are not fated to be together. We are not from the same world. In the future, she would be the young madam of a great family. Although the masked youth in front of her was strong, he was still ordinary. Xiao Wanru treated the youth in front of her as a passerby in her life and did not miss him. Yi Guqin looked deeply at Xiao Wanru and said indifferently, this is your own choice. Don't regret it. Madame Xiao saw this and immediately snatched the jade slip from Xiao Wanru's hand and threw it into the smelly ditch beside the city gate. Kid, Wanru has nothing to do with you anymore. Madame Xiao said expressionlessly. Yi Guqin did not say anything. He cupped his fists slightly at Xiao Lai and left. What's with this kid's attitude? He thinks he's someone just because he has a little bit of strength. Madame Xiao rolled her eyes at Yi Guqin and turned to Xiao Wanru with a smile. Wanru, you will definitely be grateful to me in the future for helping you make the best decision. Is that so? Xiao Wanru's beautiful eyes showed a trace of confusion. Sigh. It's fine if you're snobbish, but you actually taught your daughter to be like this. Xiao Lai shook his head and sighed. He was a little disappointed and felt that Xiao Wanru seemed to have made an extremely wrong choice. I'm letting my daughter see the truth. Let's not talk about this for now. Let's go to the Shinto family quickly. The day of meteoric success is just around the corner. Madame Xiao smiled proudly and could not wait. Xiao Wanru also followed behind as if she had accepted her fate. On the other side, Yi Guqin, who had entered northern Liang City, did not take Xiao Wanru's matter to heart. He was also not in a hurry to go to the inn where the Sword Sect's Pagoda Forest disciples were. Instead, he found a place to stay. The battle between the top prodigies had not started yet, so Yi Guqin was not in a hurry. After adjusting his breathing and recovering his tired spirit, Yi Guqin was also prepared to inquire about the current situation between the 7 major forces and the barbarian race. And in this inquiry, Yi Guqin also received a piece of news that surprised him. After the 7 major forces exchange, the Shinto family would hold the wedding of Shinto Miao and Gongsun Xiaoye. Gongsun Xiaoye? Isn't that Xiao Wanru? Yi Guqin was puzzled. Compared to a small family like the Xiao family, the Gongsun family was a true super family in the Great Desolate Prefecture, and was on the same level as the Shinto family. Gongsun Xiaoye was also a prodigy of the Consonance Palace. Although she was not as good as LV Qinghan, she was not far behind. What caught Yi Guqin's attention was that the Gongsun family was a family of blacksmiths, and Gongsun Xiaoye was a genius in blacksmithing. Hey, have you heard? Gongsun Xiaoye from the Gongsun family will hold a blacksmithing convention at the gem forging building tomorrow. From what she said, if there is a younger generation that can surpass her in blacksmithing, they will be able to obtain all kinds of treasured materials, and even the rare snow clay fetus. Snow clay fetus is the kind of supreme treasure that can repair most damaged divine weapons. Yes, I heard that even mystical pattern divine weapons can be repaired with snow clay fetus. In a bustling city, Yi Guqin's eyes lit up when he heard this. He was wearing a bamboo hat and covering his face. Although his blood hell sword and heavenly demon general armor had the blood spirit array, they required a large amount of killing and absorbing blood essence to repair, so their recovery speed was not fast. However, if he had snow clay fetus, Yi Guqin could at least guarantee that the recovery of the 2 divine weapons would be accelerated. A blacksmithing competition. Yi Guqin thought. Not to mention that he was familiar with swords as a sword cultivator, he had learned from the old drunkard for a while in the Sky River province. Yiguchin did not know the details of the old drunkard. However, he knew that the old drunkard was at least a 5-star blacksmith, or even higher. It could be said that even the Gongsun family, which specialized in blacksmithing, did not have a 5-star blacksmith. Therefore, Yiguchin still had some confidence in the blacksmithing convention held by Gongsun Xiaoye. His broken meteorite soft sword was a fine product of 100,000 refinements. If not for the low quality of the material, it would not have been broken so easily. I was able to forge 100,000 refinements when I was in the Qi refinement realm. I wonder what level I can reach now. Can Gongsun Xiaoye reach tens of thousands of refinements? Yiguchin was curious. Yiguchin was determined to get the snow clay fetus that could repair the blood hell sword and heavenly demon general armor. Chapter 392. Just as Yiguchin was preparing for the blacksmith general assembly, Madame Xiao and the rest rushed to the Shinto family's residence impatiently. As the main residence of the Shinto family, Northern Liang City's residence was naturally magnificent. From afar, a huge residence that occupied a vast area could be seen. It was extremely spacious, with pavilions, terraces, and richly ornamented rafters. At the entrance were 2 stone lions that were 30 feet tall. They were extremely domineering, revealing the deep heritage of a super family. Do you see that? This is a super family. Just the entrance is several times bigger than our Xiao family. Madame Xiao straightened her back, grinning from ear to ear. Beside her, Xiao Lai's face also revealed a slight smile. Xiao Wanru was originally very resistant to marrying Shintu Miao, and even felt very wronged. However, looking at the magnificent residence in front of her, the grievance in her heart lessened slightly. I was still thinking of breaking off the engagement. Looking at it now, I was indeed naive. Xiao Wanru suddenly felt that marrying Shintu Miao might not be a particularly bad thing. The 3 of them walked to the entrance of the residence and found 2 Shinto family guards standing guard at the entrance. May I ask where young Master Shinto is? Madame Xiao asked indifferently. It was as if she was already the old madam of the Shinto family. Who are you? One of the guards cast a sidelong glance at Madame Xiao. Madame Xiao and the rest had fled all the way here. When they reached Northern Liang City, they could not wait any longer. They did not even wash up before rushing over in a hurry. Hence, at this moment, the 3 of them were covered in dirt and dust. Madame Zhao's injured shoulder was bandaged, and she looked rather miserable. How dare you? Are you blind? You don't even recognize the old madam? I can ask young Master Shintu Miao to chase you out of the Shinto family with just one word. Madame Xiao frowned and put her hands on her waist when she saw the guard's sloppy attitude. Damn it, where did this crazy woman come from? As a guard of the Shinto family, he had never been provoked like this. The guard's footsteps flashed, and he appeared in front of Madame Xiao, slapping her. Pa! This slap was extremely heavy, and it sent Madame Xiao flying 30 feet away. A few of her teeth fell out, and half of her face was red and swollen. You're rebelling. Madame Xiao covered her face and cried out in pain. What are you doing? Just as Xiao Lai was about to step forward, another guard immediately stopped him. The guard who had hit Madame Xiao stood in front of her again. Pa! 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 4 or 5 slaps were delivered to Madame Zhao's face, making her dizzy and seeing stars. Both her cheeks were completely swollen. Stop! Don't treat my mother like this. Xiao Wanru cried out when she saw this. Hey, this girl's skin is not bad. A strange light appeared in the guard's eyes as he looked at Xiao Wanru. Although Xiao Wanru was also travel-worn, her face was elegant and beautiful, making people's eyes light up. You! Xiao Wanru took a few steps back. She was terrified. Why? Why did this happen? They were here to form a marriage alliance, so how did they end up like this? Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded from nearby. What are you doing? Stop! The two guards glanced over and instantly stopped. They bowed and said, Greetings, young master. A young man with a stocky build, who resembled Shintu Miao, walked over. He was one of Shintu Miao's cousins, Shintu Yuan. You are, from the Xiao family? Shintu Yuan glanced at Madame Xiao and the others and asked in surprise. He had occasionally heard Shintu Miao talk about the Xiao family, so he recognized them at this moment. Yes, yes, yes. This young master has a discerning eye. Our Wanru is young master Shintu Miao's fiancée. She came here today to fulfill the marriage agreement. These two bastards actually stopped us and even hit us. Please punish them, young master. Madame Xiao said flatteringly to Shintu Yuan while glaring fiercely at the two guards. The faces of the two guards paled. They looked at each other with fear in their eyes. Could it be that they had really offended a big shot? However, after hearing Madame Xiao's words, Shintu Yuan had a strange look in his eyes. He hesitated for a moment and asked, Haven't you heard of a piece of news in northern Yang City? What news? Madame Xiao asked subconsciously. My cousin, Shintu Miao, will soon marry the pearl of the Gongsun family, Gongsun Xiaoye, Shintu Yuan said lightly. What? Madame Xiao froze on the spot as if she had been struck by lightning. She did not recover for a moment. Xiao Lai also took 2 steps back, his eyes filled with disbelief. As for Xiao Wanru, her face was even paler. She clenched her jade-like hands tightly. Could it be a mistake? How could it be? My husband has an agreement with that old master Shintu. Madame Xiao said with trembling lips. The Gongsun family is a super family. How can your small Xiao family compare to it? Shintu Yuan frowned slightly. It's my fault, it's my fault. However, can you help introduce us to young master Shintu Miao? Madame Xiao slapped herself and continued to beg. Shintu Yuan glanced at Xiao Wanru casually and said lightly, Follow me. Madame Zhao's swollen face lit up. As long as she could see Shintu Miao, there was still hope. Shintu Yuan brought the 3 people from the Xiao family into the mansion. The 2 guards, however, heaved a sigh of relief. TSK, I thought it was some big shot. Turns out it's just a few dogs who want to suck up to the Shintu family, the guard said disdainfully. After entering the mansion, Shintu Yuan brought the 3 people to a spacious courtyard. The courtyard was full of spirit energy. It was obviously an excellent place to cultivate. A muscular man with a bare upper body was waving a saber that was as tall as a person. He was cultivating. It was Shintu Miao. Cousin, the Xiao family is here. Shintu Yuan left immediately after speaking. Shintu Miao put down the saber in his hand and glanced casually at the 3 people from the Xiao family. Young master Shintu Miao, look. I've brought my Wanru here to fulfill the marriage agreement. Madame Xiao held Xiao Wanru's jade-like hand and walked forward. Shintu Miao looked at Xiao Wanru. Although she was covered in dust, it could not hide her natural beauty. She had the temperament of a lady from a respectable family. Xiao Wanru lowered her head, not daring to look at Shintu Miao. His muscular body and demonic markings, coupled with his rough appearance, made Xiao Wanru feel disgusted, but she did not dare to say anything. Sure. Shintu Miao nodded with satisfaction. Although he did not like a small family like the Xiao family, Xiao Wanru was indeed beautiful and charming. Then young master Shintu, about the wedding. Madame Xiao was delighted when she saw Shintu Miao's satisfied expression. My wedding with Xiaoye will be after the exchange of the 7 major forces. Since you guys are here, let's do it together, Shintu Miao said calmly. Together, what do you mean? Madame Xiao did not react. Xiao Lai, however, frowned. Nothing. My wife is Gongsun Xiaoye of the Gongsun family. As for Xiao Wanru, she's only fit to be my concubine. Shintu Miao's words caused the three people from the Xiao family to freeze on the spot. Xiao Wanru raised her head abruptly, a trace of shame and anger in her eyes. Chapter 393. No matter what, Xiao Wanru had learned the 4 arts since she was young. She was a well-educated lady. A woman like her should be the main wife at the very least. Being someone else's concubine was a form of humiliation. Young Master Shintu, why do you have to humiliate Wanru like this? Xiao Wanru clenched her fists tightly. Her delicate body trembled with shame and anger. No matter how small the Xiao family was, it was still a family. Xiao Wanru was a proper lady. Xiao Wanru had been unwilling to marry Shintu Miao as his main wife. Moreover, she was now a concubine. The status of a concubine was much lower than that of a main wife. To put it bluntly, she was no different from a concubine. In front of the main wife, she was just a servant. Shintu Miao frowned slightly at Xiao Wanru's words. Wanru, don't say anything. Madame Xiao tugged at Xiao Wanru. Xiao Lai suppressed his anger and stepped forward. Young Master Shintu, your father and I are friends. He promised that Wanru would be your wife in the future, not a concubine. You really don't know how to be content. You dare to be presumptuous in the Shintu family just because of some small favor. To be honest, this is also my father's intention. Your Xiao family is worthless compared to the Gongsun family. Shintu Miao said disdainfully as he glanced coldly at Xiao Lai. The Gongsun family was a super family and a family of blacksmiths. Shintu Miao and Gongsun Xiaoye's marriage was utilitarian. It would benefit both families. What about the Xiao family? A small family in Wuyan City that had almost been wiped out by the blood barbarians. Only the 3 of them were left. There was no comparison between the two. Shintu Miao could not give up on Gongsun Xiaoye because of Xiao Wanru. With Gongsun Xiaoye's status, how could she be a concubine? You. Xiao Lai's chest heaved. He was obviously furious. Xiao Wanru's eyes were red. She felt greatly humiliated, and her delicate body trembled. Young Master Shintu, Wanru did not want to marry you. I originally wanted to break off the engagement. Since that's the case, it's just as well. Xiao Wanru said through clenched teeth. Humph. Shintu Tong snorted coldly, clearly angry. Wanru, shut up. Pa. Madame Xiao slapped Xiao Wan's soft and jade-like face, and a bright red palm print instantly appeared on her fair face. Mother, you hit me. Xiao Wanru covered her face in a daze, unable to regain her senses for a moment. Being able to receive young Master Shintu's favor is your good fortune from your previous life. Being his concubine is already very good. Hurry up and apologize to young Master Shintu and agree to be his concubine. Madame Zhao's hands were trembling, but she still spoke. Xiao Wanru looked at Xiao Lai on the other side. Xiao Lai also lowered his head in pain. With nowhere else to go, the 3 of them could only rely on the Shintu family. There was no other way. Xiao Wanru forcefully endured the humiliation in her heart. She suddenly recalled the jade slip that Yi Guqin had given her. Unfortunately, it had already been thrown away. If I had made the other choice. Xiao Wanru lowered her head in pain. Even if he made the other choice, that young Master Yi should still be unable to compare to the Shintu family. Thinking of this, Xiao Wanru gritted her teeth. Her lips were covered in blood as she said, Wanru was wrong. I'm willing to serve young Master Shintu and become his concubine, she said each word with great difficulty. Shintu Miao glanced at Xiao Wanru and nodded lightly, then that's it. Oh right, Xiaoye will be holding a blacksmith convention tomorrow. You can go and observe. You can also build a good relationship with her. After Shintu Miao finished speaking, he sent them away. The 3 people from the Xiao family left the Shintu family mansion in an extremely sorry state. Wanru, let's find an inn to wash up and dress up. Tomorrow, we'll go see that Miss Gongsun. We must remember to please her so that we can live comfortably, Madame Xiao said patiently. However, what welcomed her was Xiao Wanru's remorseful and cold gaze. Mother, Wanru really regrets listening to you. Xiao Wanru covered her red face with a trace of extremely faint hatred. You little girl, how can you say that? Mother is doing this for your own good. How can that unknown boy compare to young Master Shintu? It's already good enough that he can become a concubine. Madame Xiao immediately screamed. All of you, shut up. Xiao Lai's tone was extremely tired. After that, the three of them found an inn to freshen up and prepare. A day passed. The next day, Gongsun Xiaoye's blacksmith convention officially began. Although this was not a particularly important event and could not attract the top prodigies and some big shots, Gongsun Xiaoye was still a Gongsun Xiaoye after all. However, Gongsun Xiaoye was still a proud daughter of a super family and a disciple of the Rhino Divine Palace. Therefore, there were many people who came to support this blacksmith convention. In front of the gem forging building, a youth dressed in black and wearing a bamboo hat stood in the crowd. It was Yiguchen. After hearing about the blacksmith convention, Yiguchen rested and reorganized before coming here directly. His purpose was naturally to obtain the snow clay fetus. With the snow clay fetus, the repair of the blood prison sword and heavenly demon general armor would speed up, and some of the damaged spirit patterns could be used again. Therefore, Yiguchen had to beat Gongsun Xiaoye in this blacksmith convention. The Gongsun family is a family of blacksmiths, so Gongsun Xiaoye must have some ability. Yiguchen thought to himself. Gongsun Xiaoye's ability might not be much among the prodigies, but in terms of blacksmithing, some of the top prodigies were far inferior to her. Therefore, Yiguchen did not have the slightest intention of underestimating her. He walked to the front of the gem forging building and asked about the blacksmith convention. The registration fee of 20,000 crystal jades. The person in charge of the registration area said lightly. Generally speaking, most blacksmiths who knew a little about blacksmithing had accumulated some wealth. Therefore, such an expensive registration fee could also filter out a group of people who wanted to fish in troubled waters. Yiguchen did not mind. He took out 20,000 crystal jades and directly entered the gem forging building. The gem forging building was grand and bustling with people. In the central hall, there were many stone platforms. On the stone platforms, different types of ores and metals were placed according to their categories. An old man walked out of the crowd and said loudly. The gem forging building is honored that all the blacksmiths have come to participate in Miss Gongsun's blacksmith convention. Without further ado, I will now announce the rules. Miss Gongsun wants to compete with the real elite blacksmiths, so before that, there will be a test. The test is divided into 2 stages. The first stage is to identify materials, and the second stage is to select materials. The ores and metals on the stone platforms in front of you are the materials you need to identify. Each person can identify 10 types, and as long as 7 types are correct, you can enter the second stage, the old man said. As soon as he said that, many of the participating blacksmiths started to discuss. Most of them thought that the stage was too simple. Only Yiguchen frowned secretly. He thought that Gongsun Xiaoye's test was definitely not that simple. Just at this moment, a loud and clear laughter suddenly rang out. I'm late. I hope that cousin-in-law will not take offense. A stocky man walked over from the crowd. There were 3 people behind him. This man was Shintu Yuan, who had led Xiao Lai and the others. He was also Shintu Miao's cousin. The 3 people behind him were Xiao Lai, Madame Xiao, and Xiao Wanru. They casually swept their gazes and saw Yiguchen among the participants. Why are they here? Yiguchen also saw them. Chapter 394. At the same time that Yiguchen saw Xiao Lai and the others. Xiao Lai and the others also saw Yi Guqin. "What are you doing here, little brother?" Xiao Lai was surprised. "What is that brat doing in a place like this?" Madame Xiao glanced at Yi Guqin. She was a little surprised. Only Xiao Wanru felt a little guilty, not daring to meet Yi Guqin's gaze. She lowered her head slightly, her eyelids drooping. Now that she was about to become Shintu Miao's concubine, how could she face Yi Guqin? However, Madame Xiao had already instructed Xiao Wanru to build a good relationship with Gongsun Xiaoye, so Xiao Wanru had no choice but to come. After Shintu Yuan and the others arrived, there was a curtain on the second floor of the pavilion. A delicate voice sounded from behind the curtain. "Who's your cousin-in-law? Watch your mouth." The owner of this delicate voice was the pearl of the Gongsun family, Gongsun Xiaoye. At the same time, she was also a forging genius. However, Gongsun Xiaoye's reputation was matched by her lawless and fierce personality. She was known as the Gongsun family's little chili pepper. Therefore, no one was surprised that Gongsun Xiaoye spoke so rudely. Shintu Yuan did not mind. He laughed and said, "Although Miss Gongsun is not now, you will be soon." The person I like is a forging genius. That Shintu Miao is an idiot in this aspect. If father did not force me, who would want to marry that rough man? Gongsun Xiaoye's arrogant voice sounded from behind the curtain. Everyone in the pavilion was a little embarrassed when they heard that. Only Gongsun Xiaoye dared to casually call Shintu Miao an idiot. However, this caused Xiao Wanru's mood to become even more bitter. With Gongsun Xiaoye's status, she could despise and even insult Shintu Miao. On the other hand, she was only fit to be a concubine, and could not complain at all. The disparity was too great. Shintu Yuan smiled and shook his head. He knew Gongsun Xiaoye's personality, so he did not care. "I'm just here to participate in the blacksmith convention. Miss Gongsun, you won't be so rude, right? That's up to you. If you can beat me in forging, then I won't marry Shintu Miao. I'll marry you." Gongsun Xiaoye's words shocked everyone to death, once again shocking everyone. I wouldn't dare. Shintu Yuan's forehead was covered in sweat as he hurriedly waved his hands. Gongsun Xiaoye was indeed the little pepper of the Gongsun family. She dared to say anything. Next, the first round of talent identification officially began. Yi Guqin, Shintu Yuan, and all the participating blacksmiths stood in front of a stone platform. When they saw that Yi Guqin was also standing in front of the stone stage with the other participants, Xiao Lai and the others were very surprised. "I couldn't tell that little brother is actually an artificer." Xiao Lai sighed. "What blacksmith?" "That kid's strength is not bad, but I don't believe that he is also proficient in blacksmithing. Maybe he just wants to admire Miss Gongsuin's elegance." Madame Xiao curled her lips. For some reason, Xiao Wanru felt even more disappointed when she heard Madame Xiao's words. So he came to participate in the competition because he wants to see Miss Gongsuin's beauty? Xiao Wanru was a little disappointed. At this moment, she felt that Yi Guqin was no different from those ordinary people. With Yi Guqin's sharp senses, he naturally heard what Madame Xiao and the others were saying. However, he didn't have to explain anything, and he didn't mind. Yi Guqin looked at the metal ore on the stone platform in front of him. It was a square-shaped stone with specks of star-like light mixed within. When Yi Guqin was forging the soft sword with the old drunkard had taught Yi Guqin a lot of knowledge about forging in his spare time. Among them was a book called Heavenly Works Mineral Collection. It recorded almost all the ore information in the South Horizon region and even the entire 9 regions. This kind of information was extremely rare. In the entire Saint Yuan dynasty, the information about ores in this book was probably only a few tenths of what was in the Heavenly Works mineral collection. Yi Guqin had also read it when he was free, so he had accumulated a lot of knowledge. "This is the star spot stone," Yi Guqin said. An attendant recorded the answer, took the star spot stone, and placed a new piece of metal on the platform. The results would only be announced after all the materials were identified. The rest of the participants were the same. This is too easy. Looks like Miss Gongsun wants us to pass. The participating blacksmiths all heaved a sigh of relief. They were very relaxed and chatted casually. It was obvious that identifying these stones was very easy in their eyes. Shintu Yuan was the fastest to identify the stones among this group of people. He had already identified the fifth piece. However, after the fifth piece, Shintu Yuan began to frown and ponder. It wasn't just Shintu Yuan. The rest of the blacksmiths were the same. After the fifth piece, the difficulty seemed to increase by a lot. This should be a fire obsidian. This is a demon essence crystal. A young blacksmith who was rather famous, in a hurry to win, directly spoke up and identified the 10 materials. However, in the end, the results were announced. This blacksmith identified all 5 materials incorrectly. In the identification round, 7 out of 10 materials had to be identified correctly in order to pass. Therefore, he was directly eliminated. What an idiot! When identifying materials, the most important thing is to guard against arrogance and rashness. Is he worthy of being called a blacksmith? Gongsun Xiaoye's disdainful snort came from behind the pavilion's curtain. When this was said, the rest of the blacksmiths were even more alarmed. They didn't dare to be impatient and identified the materials very carefully. Even Shintu Yuan slowed down and picked up the minerals to identify them carefully. Junior sister, this question of yours isn't simple. Another woman's voice came from behind the curtain. However, it was only a whisper, and no one below heard it. This cold and smooth voice belonged to LV Qinghan. He, the minerals at the back were taken from the family's treasury. Only the old men in the family can identify them. However, senior sister LV, who do you think is the most qualified to compete with me? Gongsun Xiaoye giggled. It should only be Shintu Yuan. Although his cultivation isn't high, in terms of blacksmithing, he can be said to be the best in the younger generation of the Shintu family. Otherwise, he wouldn't have the confidence to participate in the competition. LV Qinghan said lightly. Is that so? Then let's wait and see. However, it's a pity that Sister Qin didn't come to watch the show. Gongsun Xiaoye said. It's fine. She just can't get over it and can't get rid of the influence Yi Guqin had on her. She will figure it out in the future. LV Qinghan said. I also want to see that sword master. It's a pity. Gongsun Xiaoye said regretfully. At this moment, there was a sudden commotion from the crowd below. What's going on? Gongsun Xiaoye and LV Qinghan both looked over. Hasn't this kid learned a lesson from the mistakes of others? He probably wants to finish quickly and get first place to attract Miss Gongsun's attention. Ridiculous. The materials at the back are so difficult to identify, but he can still identify them so quickly. He's probably just guessing. There were many blacksmiths whispering around. It turned out that it was because Yi Guqin maintained the same speed as before, while the others were still identifying the 5th and 6th pieces. Yi Guqin had already identified the 8th piece. That was why he attracted the attention of the surrounding people. You're tuning into the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.